Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Are y'all ready?
Ladies and gentlemen, the show will begin in approximately 5 minutes.
This program is intended for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised.
Well, good evening. How's it going, everybody? It's good to see everybody in. I've got a few of my regulars in. Jim Largo, hey, how's it going? Giant Head Jim, good to see you, sir. Bjorn Jorgensen, good to see you, sir. How's everybody doing this fine Sunday afternoon? I'm just kind of chilling out here. I'm trying out a few new things. I've got a new camera set up here. It's still my iPhone, but I've got it over here. I'm not going to be doing a separate desk cam today. This tends to look a little bit better than the built-in camera on the laptop. Tell me how the sound sounds. Tell me if everything's looking okay. If I know a little bit earlier I was having a few issues with my connection, so the connection seems to have stabled out here. If Nightbot gets on your nerves, let me know. I'll get it off of there. I'm trying out different things and trying to see how things work out. So just let me know how it goes. I thought I would try a few different things today. I've got my YouTube channel pulled up on a separate screen over here, and I thought maybe we might look at some of my past endeavors that maybe you guys haven't had a chance to see today. I'll let you guys kind of decide what y'all want to look at. Pope was on here the other day when I was cussing and carrying out and acting a total fool. I'm not going to do all the profanity, but I'm still quite upset about what happened with what was going on with Mattel Creations. And Jim Largo says that Mattel Creations screwed the pooch. Yeah, well, they crapped in the bed as far as I'm concerned. I don't understand what the deal was on that. And all those canceled orders, I still think that those canceled orders were all that stock that ended up in Frank's. I really do. And how that ended up there, I don't know. But like I said, I think it was sold out of the back of a truck. It doesn't sound good, does it? And of course, Grindhead Jim agrees with that. Jim Largo got a chance to see us go to Clarksdale and hang out with our friend Pat Davis and get some of that good old fashioned barbecue that he sells over there at Abe's. If anybody ever gets a chance to go into Clarksdale, Mississippi, there's a blues festival once a year over there. If y'all want to go, a juke joint festival. If you ever get a chance to go into Clarksdale, make sure you go over and stop in and see Pat at Abe's Barbecue and get you a good old Big Abe's barbecue sandwich. And Bjorn, it's good to see you, sir. Bjorn says he's doing good, working on a few different projects. Jim says it's a lazy, rainy day in Guatemala, just chilling on the porch. Well, that's a good thing, I guess. It's kind of a hot, dry summer here in Mississippi. Here's Jim. Come on in the stream there, Jim. Let me get my separate. Well, hold on. I've got two of me on here. Let me get me off of here and get you on here and side by side. And oh, Lord, have mercy. How am I going to do this?
So if you put the mouse over top of the one you don't want, you should be able to hit remove.
Okay. Remove from stream. If that removes from screen, it'll mute me.
Oh, because you have the mic on the second cam?
Yeah, that's. I'm using the mic here on the headset instead of the mic that's on
Oh,
that.
no, I gotcha. Um,
Here. Let me do this. I'll try this one then and see how that works. I might have to mess around here. Hold on. I'm gonna mute.
no, I see what he's doing. It's got the backup ready to go. I'm impressed. You're now. I'm sure you can still hear me. I'm still muted, or you're still muted.
All right. Now can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
All right. Well,
Still sounds good
that's
too.
okay. Well, it's the built-in headphones to the iPhone. Let me move it around some.
Need to get you an extension cord, pal.
All right. Now let's see here. This is going to look like crap, but who cares?
Well, I mean,
All right. Now let me get the phones in my ear so I can hear you. I can't hear anything right now. Okay. How's that?
that's perfectly fine.
All right.
Um,
Yeah, there we go.
Now, what you could do, because you have the phone hooked into the computer's reading it as a webcam, right?
No,
So,
actually, I'm doing a Streamlabs trick here with it. I'm
oh,
using
so
it.
you're connecting through two different devices,
Yeah,
two different
see,
browsers. Okay,
I've got the free Streamlabs going on here, and
right.
you can't have a second cam unless you buy Streamlabs. So I'm
Oh,
kind of stuck.
even with the initial tier, I have to do the same trick, but because I have four monitors and I can run multiple browsers and all that shit, I can get away with that. Um, but there's one of these nights I'm going to have to talk to you offline, off stream, and I can walk you through some cool stuff you can do to make it
Yeah.
relatively simple to do this stuff, because you got a good grasp on everything. You know your way around tech. It's just sometimes using things in a way that's non-traditional. Some folks they don't think that way, and even for a
Well,
customer
you may not
yourself.
know this, Jim. I know you know that I work in a factory and I work
Well, I know you
like
know
a
HTML
dog all
coding
day
really well.
long, and I'm a big old biker and ride on a motorcycle all the time. But believe it or not, what I really wanted to do in life was to work on these damn computers. And
Yeah.
at one time back in the late '90s and early 2000s, I was a whiz at this shit. But now things have started to move away from me. I've become what's known as a boomer now for some reason. I always thought I was Gen X for some reason, but everybody says I'm a boomer now because I understand the tech and I can think outside the box like a programmer because I can program. I can program in
Yeah.
Java. I can program in a little bit in C, and I'm a whiz at JavaScript, and I can make beautiful web pages. But my problem with my web pages is they're all Web 1.0. So I can make a beautiful Web 1.0 page, but that's not what people want anymore. So I'm kind of
Right.
out of it, but I still know how to do that stuff. We got
No, I know
somebody that
that.
comes in here, Ian Sweeney. It's good to see you, Mr. Sweeney. Said that's far too technical for me.
Hey,
When it comes to tech
Sweeney.
setups, I'm a fire bad, tree pretty level. All right, then. Fire bad. Jim the
Bad good.
pros. Yeah, Jim. I think there you go. You're
Pros.
starting to move a little bit now, and that's the other thing.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but sometimes my internet connection, even though I've got a good cable company here with my internet connection, it gets a little noise in the line every once in a while, and I can see you kind of fuzzing out on me right now. So I think you probably have some of the same issues.
Similar, because what I'm dealing with here, like what what you met me with was
Yeah.
essentially hotel Wi-Fi, and even with the premium stuff there, it ain't great because you're sharing with a bunch of people. Now I've switched to a 5G modem from T-Mobile,
Hmm.
and so it's
Hmm.
essentially a cellular connection. But for the price and for what it offers when it is working well, it's totally worth it. But
Right.
because it is cellular in nature, there's going to be dips here and there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I would like to say that in the last month, like it's been amazing. Like a lot of channels upload in 720, and I used to do that for a long time, and it had nothing to do with not wanting to render out files that big. It had to deal with me not wanting to have to upload files that big because the
Right.
upload speed was abysmal. But now I've been rendering out in 1080p and loving it, and I like to think that it's reflecting well on the channel as well. The
Well,
downside is that a lot of my
most of the time when you're streaming, you look pretty damn good, but it waves around a little bit, just and even though I've got a wired connection here, and
Mhm.
I've got an old Netgear modem. I don't know how, not modem, but router, and I don't know how old that router is, and it's doing both Wi-Fi and wired. And
Right.
one of the first
Yeah.
things I did when I set this deal up down here in the junk room was I wired the laptop straight to the router, so that it's not getting that Wi-Fi. Although the
Sure.
the cell phone is on the Wi-Fi, so it and the laptop that I use for most of my editing is in the living room, so I can edit while I'm watching TV.
Sure.
And that one is also on the Wi-Fi. So it and I've noticed that the more things are going on, it tends to take my bandwidth down. Like for
Right.
instance, right now I think my wife is in there watching something on Netflix, and that's probably stealing a little bit of my bandwidth right now.
A little. But when it comes to downstream versus upstream kind of stuff, like I had to deal with that way too much. I know way too much about networking than I should because of all the problems I've had over the last 10 years. But I remember the day that I went from what was it, 32 56K modem to a 5 meg. I remember that day, and I was like, it was like this
Well,
huge thing.
see, I live in the Mississippi Delta here, and this is a very economically depressed area. I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on here in my neck of the woods, but for the longest time, the only internet connection that I had available to me was through a private company called GMI in Clarksdale, Mississippi. It was dial up.
Right.
Uh, that that lasted until somebody there, and see, I knew the guy that originally owned that, and then somebody there decided that unlimited didn't really mean unlimited, and I got a bill in the mail for, like, I don't know, something ridiculous, and I told him, I said, you know what, I'm not paying this. Y'all said I had unlimited, so forget it.
Right.
And then at the time, Time Warner was the cable in the area, and they started offering dial up. So I took them up on their dial up offer, and that was 56K. It was real slow, but it was a little faster than what I was getting through GMI. And I thought that was just
Sure.
lightning speed. Boy, I was just great. Whoa. And then Time Warner was bought out by a company called Cable One, which has
Hmm.
changed their name to Sparklight, and they specialize in small areas like this across the nation. And
Sure.
they offer several plans, and I think I'm probably on a legacy plan. So my upload and download speed to me is lightning fast, but it's not as fast as it could be because I'm not spending those extra bucks and getting on a different
How
plan.
how much do how much are you getting versus how much they charge?
Well, let me see. I'm curious now, Jim, because I hadn't really looked at it in a long time. Let me bring them up.
Only reason I ask is that I've really become enamored with this 5G stuff. Um,
Right. Well,
because
I
I've
I
read
worked for a little while for a cell phone company, and
Mhm.
5G is wonderful if you live in a city and you're
Right.
near enough to the tower, because the 4G towers had the ability to broadcast a good long ways and through
Mhm.
things. The
Right.
5G towers don't have that capability, which is
Not
why
yet.
all the 5G
Yeah.
commercials, you always notice they're always filming those in front of a stadium somewhere, because that's where the
Right.
5G tower is.
Right. And but the thing is that this modem does both 5 and 4. And granted, I'm in a 5G area. I'm still not getting like the full range of what 5G could be because of congestion.
Uh-huh.
But even when it's not perfect, even on a 4G connection, because I've done full streaming off of just using a phone at 4G, and it was really good.
Mhm.
But the limits were what were killing me. But with this here, for $50, 55, because I refuse to do auto pay. You could do 50 if you do auto pay, which I hate doing. I'd rather pay it manually and know when it's coming out. But
Well, the
for that,
problem with auto pay is, if you're like me, you got to make sure the damn money's in the account, because if it's not, you're fucked.
hmm oh yeah, oh yeah, and it's something that at the end of the day, I just like frankly, having control over that kind of stuff, and because
All right.
I pay stuff early. I don't want to wait for the auto pay to happen.
Right.
So
Let's see if we can. I'm going to try something here. Let's see if we'll. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a speed test live, folks. Speed test on my internet. All right.
which
Let's.
is gonna be very
It.
indicative. Oh, they rebranded speedtest.net. How industrious of them.
Oh yes.
Um,
I mean, that's how it goes. All right. We're looking at download speed right now, and
right,
I think they're going
which
to do an upload speed. This
which is
isn't too
gonna
bad, really.
right,
All right, and here's our upload speed. As you
which
can
is
see,
gonna
the
be
upload
a
speed is,
yeah, it's gonna be a
oh yeah,
low result because
very
you're
low.
using it right now.
Hmm.
All
All
right,
right. So
so
what does this tell us? All right. Once again, we got 15 megabytes per second upload. We got a little bit of jitter, not much. Ping at 20 milliseconds, and we got an upload at point 0.8. Well, hello. Come down here and say hello to Jim, Paula. I've got Mrs. Weird Fantastic Toys just walked in.
Hello.
There
hi
we
Paula.
go.
How are you doing?
Good.
She can't hear you, Jim. Here, let me give her a half of an earphone here.
Hello.
Hi. It's
How
good
are
to see
you?
you. Doing well.
Good to
Good.
see you. You look good.
I'm
I'm gonna
trying
let you go.
to. Trying to.
All right,
All
baby.
right.
She brought me a little something to eat here, so I'm going to kind of shovel a little food in my mouth while we're talking here, Jim. I think you
Sure.
did this to us one time with some McDonald's, but I've got me some good old macaroni and cheese.
Everyone always talks about that with the Melbourne stream. They're like, let's watch these guys eat McDonald's for a minute." Like, well,
All
but it
right, now
was,
back over here.
yeah.
Of course, we're covering up some of the plans here. Let me see if I can bring them. There we go. So I'm not sure which one I'm doing, and I'm not. I'm paying far too much because I've also got television involved. But
Mm,
it's probably somewhere between Internet 200 and Internet 300. I know. I'm pretty sure I'm not doing Internet 500 on this.
mm-mm. Now, especially given the results of what we just had.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, you might be on a legacy plan that's not even that fast. Like that, you might be on one that is a lower tier.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something where, for me, with like when I'm paying the premium for the Wi-Fi here, it's $30 a month,
Hmm.
and when it's not even working that great, it was like, well, I'll spend an extra $20 for it to be, at least marginally better and more reliable. And
Hmm.
I'm happy to say that 95% of the time, it is obscenely better. Like my downloads are around, I don't know, anywhere from 30 to 100, depending upon the day. Then the uploads are anything from 5 megs up to like 12. and it's consistent enough to where I notice a huge difference. Like, I would change my mind. I would have to make decisions on what I'm watching, how I'm watching it, and what I'm doing, and how I'm doing it based upon the speeds that were available to me at the time. Whereas now, I find myself just not. I just watch stuff now at 1080p, and I don't worry about things, and it's very nice. Now, if you do have a higher speed than what the speed test would seem to indicate, it is a good possibility that depending upon how old that router is, that the router is truncating that connection to stranglehold, because routers do have an upward bandwidth limit, even on the wired aspect of it.
I have a feeling that it's probably 100 megabits per second.
Okay, which
I,
was the standard for a very long time.
and I'm thinking that the inside my house here, even though I've got that good speed, I'm going at probably at 100 megabits per second off this router. And as far as streaming on the TV goes, it works just fine.
Sure,
I
sure.
mean,
And what's interesting to me with the streaming is that, especially with video, like when you're just using any one of the streaming services or what have you, those tend to be optimized fairly well for relatively low speed. It wasn't always that way. They're
well,
getting better.
I'll tell you, most of the decent streaming services are, and I don't mean decent as in the content. I just mean decent as in what they offer as software.
Sure.
Will allow you to lower the speed on that so that you can get a decent frame rate.
Sure.
Except for HBO Max, there's something freaking wrong with those people. HBO Max is
Yeah.
one of the worst damn services that I've got, and I didn't really want it. The only reason I got it was because the DC Comics app quit showing the cartoons on it, so I had to go to HBO Max. And
Now, I like a lot of the stuff on there.
Let me tell a little story real quick. I screwed up with HBO Max when I first got it because I found out that they had like all the first and second season of Sesame Street on there. And so I was sick and I was here at the house and didn't have crap to do except watch TV. So I started binge watching like the first season of Sesame Street. And what I didn't realize was HBO Max, the way it optimizes things, instead of letting you optimize it to the speed you want it to be, it optimizes your speed to the highest speed that you can possibly get within with what you've got.
Right.
So when I checked how much usage that I had for that month, I was right on the edge of using up all my usage for that month just for watching one day of Sesame Street on HBO Max.
They give you. You still have a data cap. That's
I have a data cap. I do have a data cap, and when you go over that data cap, it doesn't stop your data. Your data keeps going.
No.
They're just sitting there going, "Okay, we're fixing to make some money off this ass now. We're gonna make plenty of money off of it."
And that's another. And again, I'm not trying to sell you on this, but just to give you an idea of why I pulled the trigger. There's no data caps on this,
right?
Like it's designed to be a home internet usage with modern tendencies and all this stuff.
Well, normally I can watch all the TV I want. I can watch all the YouTube I want, which I'm a boomer now, right? So I watch it on the television set instead of watching it on my phone because the phone's too little.
I don't watch.
I don't have a problem with hitting my data caps. I mean, and I don't sail the high seas like I used to, but I used to do that a lot to get some of the shows that I couldn't get normally, like Doctor Who. And I never reached my data cap even on those when I was doing that. So I don't know what it is about HBO Max, but they're rapidly making me want to just cancel them altogether. If it wasn't for the DC stuff that's on there, I probably would. And it's the same thing with Disney Plus. I'm about sick of them, and I'm about ready to say to hell with Disney Plus too. But the problem with that is, if I want to watch a Marvel movie, that's where I've got to go to watch it. And that's how the streaming services have screwed us all, is because it used to all be on Netflix, but then they said, okay, we can make money like Netflix if we take all our shows off Netflix and make our own streaming service.
It's true.
So
And
nobody's saving any money now.
what to me, what's interesting about that is that I own the majority of Marvel movies on Blu-ray
Mhm.
and digital. Yet, even though I have access to them digitally through other means, I will often gravitate to Disney Plus just because it's easier. And their data optimization tends to be pretty good in terms of
Yeah,
picture
Disney
quality
Plus is
and
not
stuff.
bad as far as data optimization goes. I will admit that. Now, as far as the Marvel movies goes, you would probably no, you wouldn't, but some of our other viewers may be amazed at the amount of DVDs and Blu-rays that I have in my
Oh,
vast collection of movies that just fills up the living room. But and I told myself that I would never do this, but um, about 2 maybe 3 years ago, I quit buying DVDs for the most part
mhm.
because it's just easier. Like when, for instance, Multiverse of Madness just came out on the Disney Plus. I didn't go to the movie theater to watch it. Screw movie theaters. They're not getting a dime of my money anymore. I'm not spending $30 to go in there and get screwed over and watch a movie, and who knows who's in there coughing up the coof while I'm trying to watch it. So screw that. But I'll watch it all day long here at the house. Now I really didn't like Multiverse of Madness, and I'm kind of glad I didn't waste my money in a movie theater over it. But we're not going to review that movie right now.
I just saw it a couple days ago myself because I had intended to go to the theater, but then work started ramping up. Because what I tend to do, and someone called me out, a friend of mine called me on this today. Like I don't take time off work very often. Like
Mm,
I have like vacation time just piling up. So for me to take the whole week off for Iconicon, which I'm doing, um, it, for me it was a coup in the sense of like, oh, I'm just gonna take the week off and just watch this stuff. Um, but what I tend to do is on a slow day when I see that I don't have any clients at a certain period of time. If I want to go to the movies, I'll just block out my time for the gap so that no one accidentally schedules a meeting in there, and I'll just go to the movies or something. I
right.
don't like going out because I don't like going out at night. I just don't like driving at night for some reason. If I can avoid it, I don't know what it is. It wasn't always the case. I didn't seem to care, but in the last couple of years, I'm just not a fan. So I would go during the day. Plus, it's cheaper, with the movies and stuff.
Matinees. We
I,
always try to catch the matinee too, but
and I just never got around to it. So when I see that Multiverse came out on Disney Plus, I'm like, all right. And instead of blocking out time to go to the theater, I could block out less time and just watch it at home.
Mhm.
And I did. I did watch it during the day, and I enjoyed it. And again, I don't want to go into a deep review either. I don't want to go nuts. I I understand where some people were like, what happened with a specific character and like their whole arc. I'm like, I understand why they would be upset without context, but when you consider the context of why they did that and the comic storylines that fed into that idea, that it's kind of like with Civil War, they modified it to work within the MCU. They did the same thing with House of M. Um,
Mark, come in. Hey, Blue Harvest Toys. Good to see you there, brother.
hey, Blue Harvest, but I liked it, but there are parts I didn't like, but I disliked the parts I disliked were for different reasons than most people probably would say. Because I knew going in this was going to have influences from comic storylines that did things to characters that I don't enjoy because you don't like seeing characters that you like doing things you don't like. Um,
Right. And Jim Largo here, for him, it ended at Endgame, except for the Spidey movies. Well,
that's fair.
they're going to mine those storylines, and they're not going to mine the older storylines as much as they're going to mine these newer storylines for specific reasons that we shall not go into. If you want to go into those kind of reasons, you watch that rant stream that I did the other day, and you'll hear all of what I feel about that. But I'm just not going to go into that here. It's no need.
Fair enough.
But we know why they're going through those storylines. And another thing that I think that modern storytellers, I don't know if it's a trap or whether it's a good thing or not. I really can't say. But if you remember, let's just go back to the pulps, Doc Savage, and the guy who wrote them. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but
Me
he
either.
had a formula. And his formula is you take your hero and you heap as much misery on him as you possibly can in the first part of the book, and then you heap even more misery on him to the point to where the reader is just about ready to break, and then the hero begins to solve his problem and begin to get out of it. And by the end of the book, he's either in a better place than he was before, or he's right back where he began. So that when the next book starts, we just pick right up with this character that everybody knows and in a position that he's been in the whole time. And that's the way it has been with comics for years. I mean, we can do all we can to a certain point, but then everything at some point has to reset so that the icon that's in the public consciousness is still that icon. Well,
Right. And
now the popular consensus is we must progress these storylines beyond what has been for so long. So we either have to kill the hero off, or we have to put the hero in a different position so that other characters within the storyline progress. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it can be a good thing, and I think it can be a bad thing because our heroes must always be our heroes. They must always be in a position that the public consciousness realizes them to be in. Superman must work for the Daily Planet. Superman must go stand for truth, justice, and the American way. Damn it! I'm sorry. Okay, that's Superman. Okay.
and
So
yeah, and if you look at the earliest comics, there was definitely a big part of that in there. When we talk about the American stuff, and although an argument could be made that he is a global entity, um, I think the ideals that character stands for are meant to be, here's what could be, and you don't have to be American to aspire to this, but it started here because if he, there have been storylines where if he was born in Russia, or rather if he had landed in Russia, it would be very different. So he's a product of that. So when he says, the American way, it's not meant to be like a jingoistic or nationalist idea. It's just, here's his context. This is his truth.
well, we
And
also have to remember what the American way meant back in 1938 to 1940. I
very
mean, it
different than it
doesn't
meant
mean
now.
the jingoistic thing that it has become after 2001.
Yeah, we're not going to go down that road, but yeah.
No, but you know where I'm coming from on that. I mean, at the
Yes.
time, everyone in the world admired America because America stepped up to the plate when the time came to do it. And
Yeah.
and that's just the way it was. That's the way it was thought of at the time.
And when you look at so many of the people that wrote the comics that inform our modern mythology, um, most of them served during that war.
They did.
And
Jack
and
Kirby, for instance.
Stan Lee even. Yeah.
Right.
Stan Lee's in the service too. And even Steve Ditko, who by all accounts was a narcissistic piece of shit. But you know, um, which it hurts because he's like my
Well,
my favorite
the
comic
problem
book.
is we don't need to meet our heroes sometimes. We need to have
No.
that what we think of in our head, because I have met some of mine, and some of them are pieces of excrement, and some of them are the
Yeah.
nicest people on earth. But the thing about it
Yeah.
is, what in that instance, the problem is that we tend to forget that these people are human beings.
Yes.
They
And that starts with our
we
parents
place them
too.
on this pedestal, and we've got some fantasy in our mind of what their life must be and how they must live it, and we forget that they're just humans putting their britches on one leg at a time, just like we do in the morning, and they have good days and they have bad days just like we do.
And I would argue that that trickles down, like I said, it starts with your parents and it goes all the way to even now to just people that we meet on YouTube. You know, um, it's easy to forget that there's only so many hours in the day, that everyone's got their cross to bear, so to speak. And um, Doc Savage was created by, okay, I got you right on.
Blue Harvest is telling us, wait until Thor: Love and Thunder, everything's going to change. Now I don't know about that, but the storyline on that has already been done in the comics, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and I think that's to Marvel's credit in as much as they are pulling from comics, but it's an interesting problem to solve where you're pulling from the classic idea of what the public consciousness is for all these characters, and you've done at this point most of the characters the average person in a Western culture is going to know who they are, right?
Hey, Bruiser.
And and so now you're having to delve into some of the weirder or secondary ancillary characters, and they're pulling from modern, they're pulling from classic, they're melding stuff, they're making new things. But I also want to talk about something that's just a reality. As a culture, we have not been steeled again for recasting of characters, right? Because to us, Chris Evans is Captain America, right? So
Mhm.
when they're moving on from characters as time goes on, it's because they refuse to recast these characters, and I think that if there's a franchise that could get away
They're,
with it, it would be
they're going to
MCU.
have to. As a matter of fact, let's just think about Rhodey, for instance.
Sure.
They didn't even acknowledge the fact that that character was recast in the movie itself, in the meta of
Hmm.
the movie. I mean, so they didn't acknowledge that this is a different looking person at all. As far as you're supposed to be concerned as a viewer, that's the same damn character. He looks the same, even though he don't. And just move on and don't even address it. It's not necessary.
Right.
And it's the same thing with superheroes in general. As long as the actor coming into the role is a decent actor and can take that role on, it's just like a damn soap opera. You
Yeah.
shouldn't even
They
have to address it. I mean, it's just
right.
a cast change.
Yeah. They did it with Banner. They did it with.
Yeah.
They acknowledged it with Quicksilver in the WandaVision series, which I thought was great. Um,
Well, that was an Easter egg for us geeks. I think.
yeah, but I
I
think
think I think
most
I think I
people.
think I think mom and dad watching it probably wouldn't have caught that and would maybe even just kind of raise an eyebrow and keep on watching. You know.
Right, but I think at this point, if you're in, you're all in on this stuff. And I think it was also kind of a really cheeky nod to like, yeah, we bought Fox, stuff's coming, And I don't want to, again, not going to give anything away, but in Multiverse of Madness, there's a titular scene about 2/3 of the way through the film
Mm-hmm.
that says without question, like, yeah, we are already going to leverage some crap, and it certainly was a love letter to fans as well, I think too.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give them an idea of like this is what could be, like, check this out, this isn't this cool. um so it's there's on one hand
Sleeping collectibles. Hey, sleeping.
there's so much potential right now
Mm-hmm.
for where they could go. And I think partially because this current phase, if you want to call it whatever the phase is, was all in planning prior to that deal being closed,
Mm-hmm.
that many fans, old school fans like you and I, were kind of like, ah, you have all this stuff you could be doing, but development takes time. And so I think 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we might start to see
That
some.
brings up a good point there, Jim. That maybe a lot of people don't realize. Movies go into production, and it's generally 3 years before
Mhm.
anything makes it to the screen.
That's right.
So that means that what you're watching right now, all of that stuff was written, and even the pre-production on that started way before even the coup.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
And when the ball gets rolling like it does, especially for what they're doing with Marvel movies, where there's all this crossover characters from one movie coming into another, that's never ever been done before. Once that ball gets rolling, you ain't stopping it. That movie's coming out. We got to make money. We got to keep going. And that's the same thing with those TV shows that are coming out on Disney Plus. The ball has got rolling a long time ago at the very top of the hill, and we're here. And you can get in front of that ball if you want to, but all it's going to do is roll over you because it's going. They have to because it would be detrimental to their pocketbook otherwise.
And on a smaller scale, just the storylines are going to suffer if you don't have this piece in there. Like these have to come out in a somewhat specific
Exactly,
order.
exactly, and I've noticed that, and I'm another channel that I watch. I'm not going to name them. We're talking about that it has become to the point to where it is consume this so that you can consume this. You know, we all of these TV shows and these movies are so interconnected that they're leading into one another. And a
Sure.
great example of that is Obi-Wan. So we got Obi-Wan Kenobi, which was originally supposed to have been a movie,
Right.
but then the Solo movie crapped the bed, so they said, okay, we're gonna convert this into a 6-part miniseries and put it on Disney Plus, which is what they did. But everything in that seemed to be leading to what the next best thing is going to be that comes out on Disney Plus, which
Sure.
possibly is going to be a show about Reba and what becomes of her, because that's the way it was set up to me.
Which I don't think, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I mean, we're
Well,
asking a
it
lot of
doesn't have to be. It could be, but it doesn't have to
right,
be.
I think a lot of the fan base is screaming for new stuff. And if you're going to use the Obi-Wan TV series to, I hate saying TV series because it's not really TV, but it is TV. If you're using that to set up this one character with the backdrop of being all right, without giving anything away, I will say that most of the narrative problems in Obi-Wan they tried to solve in the last 20 minutes of the damn last episode. About half of which was done in a very clever way that, like, you know what, that seems throwaway, but it makes sense. It makes sense. I totally get it. I will buy this. And then on the other half, I'm like, you could have done something a little bit different there. Hey, Jason, nice to see you, pal. Um, it, so I feel like if you're going to take this encapsulated thing where you kind of know where the characters have to be, with the only exception really being Reva, you know where these characters have to be at the end of the show. So there's no like real sense of danger, which is okay. It's fine. It's whatever.
Well,
Um,
I think Paula made that joke while we were watching it. You know, Luke's well, I don't want to really get into it, but Luke is in danger and he's running, and she looks at me and she goes, he lives, and I'm like, yeah, but
right,
let's watch, let's see where this goes.
right. You know, the only thing they could have really done was like, what if like that was a kid that they like hired from like,
Right.
and he's like a decoy or something.
Yeah,
Luke's
yeah.
really been in the
Give us that
basement
old
the whole time or
curveball.
something.
But that's
Yeah,
the problem with prequels anyway. When you're watching a prequel, you already know the outcome of it to a certain extent.
sure,
Which is one of the things that Lucas got into with the prequel series, the first three movies, basically, not the real Star Wars like I would think of, but the episode 1, 2, and 3. Uh, and he had already revealed so much about that in interviews and in throwaway lines that were in the Alan Dean Foster novels and all of that we kind of
sure,
got a good idea of where that was going and how that would worked out, which is why he changed things ever so slightly. Instead of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan having their final battle over the crater of a volcano and him falling in, he did it on Mustafar, which is a whole planet of volcanoes.
right,
You
right,
know,
and then I rather I like the narrative choices that they made with regard to justifying those two characters meeting inside of Obi-Wan, and the fight. And I think it did a good job of kind of saying, okay, well, if you're going to have these fights, how does that link into like the fight they
yeah,
have in New Hope? And again, it's clever, and I just don't feel like enough time was spent on those aspects of it. But you probably could have taken about 25% of the screen time out of that entire series and gotten a really tight two movies out of it.
yeah.
Um, but as it is, I
It
mean,
was quite obvious that this was originally going to be a probably a 2 hour. movie
Oh, sure.
affair, and that they had put a little bit of filler in there to fill it out so that it filled out six episodes of a television
Yeah.
miniseries.
And, and this is something that gets me in a lot of hot water with a lot of my peers, friends, and contemporaries, where I try not to nitpick too much. I'm very capable of it, and I'll pick something apart, even something that I love. That's how I got started making content, actually. But
Well, that I think that's just the geek way.
yeah, I agree. And although I'm capable of that, I try not to. In as much as like the whole reason I'm watching this stuff is for entertainment and escapism. And unless they beat me over the head with something that's so abhorrent that it takes me out of the story, which doesn't happen as often as people seem to think it does. People go into a lot of these things. Anything Disney, which I understand why they would do this, but they seem to go into it wanting it to fail. So they are looking for reasons not to like it. That's not why I watch a show or a film. I'm looking to be entertained, and if it succeeds at that, I can forgive some technical issues or narrative. Jason says I'd have taken. Yeah, that's fair.
I,
That's fair.
I have mixed feelings about the fact that they had Obi-Wan and Vader actually fight again. That was
Yeah,
strictly to try to make some money off of people who wanted that. They. Oh, I can't
sure.
wait to see them hit. They never should have, in my opinion. The last time that those two should have met was on Mustafar, where he really could say, I mean, the last time we met, you were the master and I was but the learner. Even though that final fight kind of set us up for that. I mean, and of course,
Well,
if anybody hasn't watched that, you tell us in the chat and we'll quit this shit. But I mean, it's hard to discuss this without going into a
right.
tiny bit of detail.
What I will say that in a perfect world, that the fight in episode 3 would have been more, the movie episode 3 would
Yes.
have been better if it had been shot and choreographed similar to the fights in the Obi-Wan show. I think without question in my mind, the fights that those two characters have in the series are far superior to the wankery of the Mustafar fight. Personally,
Well, we
um,
also have to understand that in the original movies, the idea that the characters could pick up a mountain and shove it on top of each other with the force
wasn't there.
power was not there. I mean, it just wasn't
No,
there.
no,
The
of course
the
not.
the 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 abilities of the characters, much like Superman, over time have increased to a point to where it's almost impossible to write for them because they become so superhuman in their
Superheroes.
abilities to
Yeah.
use the force that it's off the rail.
But you could
And
also make the argument that in New Hope, by that point, these are both old men that are going to
yeah,
have a somewhat diminished attachment to the Force. It makes perfect sense in my head, those differences.
well, that's
Um,
because you, like I, are a true believer, and we win the no prize every time because we're going to find a
that's right.
way to shoehorn all this stuff into the canon and the
Right.
narrative.
Yeah, but I think that the writers of these are leaning into that too much because there's a large section of the fan base, whether in the general populace or of the super nerd variety of what I call the actually crowd.
Well, you don't
Yeah,
want them guys writing
actual.
for you either because you end up with crappy fanfic and with a Mary Sue in it and all that.
Well, right, and I feel like even the sequel trilogy, parts of it get unfairly maligned against. You know, and if you pull back and look at the sequel trilogy, the one thing I can agree upon with every critic out there is that the problem is that there was no plan. That was
Well,
the problem.
that's the main thing. It wasn't the fact that they took look on a story arc that people disagreed with. It was more or less that it was kind of like they didn't have a set plan for what from the beginning, the middle, and the final act should be.
Right.
They gave it to this writer or director, and they said, okay, here's your movie, you do your movie. And then when the movie was over with, they took what that guy had done and they shoved it to another guy and said, here, now you write the second one. Let's see where you go with it. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
Mad Libs. We're going to sit here and just fill in the blanks, and you just take it where you want. Well, let's just see where it ends up at. When, in other words, they should have been like Lucas with an overall arc here. We know where it's going to
Right.
start and we know where it's going to end, and let's just see how we're going to make it over there to it.
And I think the reason for that is very, very, very simple. If you think back, 7+ years ago, to win, or 8 years ago it would have been. Yeah, Force shipping ruined their knees, gave him arthritis. Absolutely, absolutely, 100%. You bet.
Yeah.
You can't
Well,
midi chlorine your way out of that. But when Disney purchased Lucasfilm, they were like, we have to have a Star Wars film by December 2015.
mhm.
They were like, have to, which is already cutting the development time by a third, at a bare minimum. So, and then you're giving it to people who, in some cases, had never worked on Star Wars before. So it's a different thing. You're making them write things really fast. So you would probably have needed that full 3 years to develop the first film, plus an extra year of prep time to look at the entirety and figure out what the
well,
overall sense.
and
And
then
they just didn't give them time.
and you're correct, and I'm not saying that you're wrong on that, but here's some more added crap. I think that they were given checklists of things. Okay, this must happen. We have to have
Oh,
this in this
sure.
movie, and we got and we've seen that because we saw a leaked photo of that board that they had where there was all these things on the board, and then we've got to include some of this in all of our movies, and
Yeah.
that tends to strangle a writer because he shouldn't be under those kinds of policies, in my opinion.
Yeah, and writing by committee is messy, uh, to begin with. It's difficult to write in a group, even when everyone has the same goal and they know, and they even have an idea of where they're going. Like, I'll give you an example. Um, One of my first creative endeavors was doing a lot of like film review stuff, and I was on an aggregate website with a bunch of other creators. Like, we all kind of pooled together. We had this idea, which wasn't super original, because we were just gonna we were gonna do like this low budget Avengers parody.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some great gags that we knew we wanted to include throughout the thing. Some really cool ones, which we thought were going to be hilarious. They would never fly today, some of them, because they were racially charged.
Oh
But they were
yeah.
written. But it was funny because the person we had as Captain America was black, and one of the jokes was there was going to be a particularly intense scene, action wise, but where Cap is in this moment, Cap is clearly a white person, and he's like, "What? We don't even have the budget to get a black stuntman? Are you serious?" Like, he was just gonna go off on this whole thing. Like,
Right.
that's the kind of thing that we were going to do. But when you have even just 6 people who, we have these storylines for these characters we're playing, in that you can get that at warlordclothing.com. Warlordclothing.com is where you can get that, because this is just kind of it's an homage to Skeletor, and that has the logo, but this is actually the name of the company as well. So yeah, grab,
I
grab
think
your one.
I commented on that shirt on one of your live streams. That is an awesome damn shirt, I have to say.
I love it.
Let's see
And my
what
buddy
Ian
Bruce,
Sweeney says here. I think my and our generation of nerds are inclined to forgive compromises made in streaming TV productions of our favorite franchises, thanks to our enduring love of older series, Blake Seven and Star Trek, for example. Okay, please don't get me started on Star Trek and what they've done with that.
yeah, no. I mean, I have one thing to say about that, and it's very simple. No one in the United Federation of Planets should ever say the F word. That's not. I swear like a Marine should, and I fully believe in freedom of speech. I love all those words, but when you look at what that society has supposedly evolved to, uh, at the point of all the way through Voyager, to regress that language usage, to this colloquial stuff, doesn't it just does not make sense. takes me right out of it, and I don't care. Because that if you're allowing the characters to do that, everything else that's happening is like, well, no wonder you're trying to turn this into something it totally isn't, and you can go spit as far as it's concerned.
Right, right, and like I said before, folks, if y'all want to really see me go off the rails, you can watch that last live stream that I did. It's filled with profanity and it's ugly, and I'm not proud of it in the least bit. And I have left it up. I think I threatened during it that I was going to take it down, but I did not take it down because it was getting good views, and I'm kind of like all about that right now.
Right. Well, I feel like the everything you had to say, even if it was charged with negative language, um, made sense. Like that's why I didn't put up a video about it. I was like, I saw that yesterday morning. I said, well, I don't have to say shit. I can just I can just push people. I can just say go. Everything Bill says is true, and
Right.
I've already had that discussion on my channel twice with the Mattel
Well,
creations.
well, none of this is new. We'll go off the only this little rabbit hole for just a second. None of this is new. It happened with Triclops, and then it happened. I'm sorry, it happened again with Coldar.
It
And
did.
now, but the thing about the Savage He-Man that really gripes me, it's not that it sold out so quickly. It's the fact that everybody's orders started getting canceled after they had been confirmed. And I can
Right.
only speculate. I can't prove this, but I, in my mind, truly believe this, that all of that stock that fell off of the back of a truck and Frank mysteriously was able to put it in Frank and Son's shop was why some of those orders got canceled, because that stock should have been available for people to purchase through that online store and not in a comic shop in California. Now,
Not to
how
mention
that
the
happened,
fact
I don't know, but I think that there's some shady shit going on with that. Sorry.
there's no doubt about that. But I think is a very very simple way without building a new store. Though I like your idea on that. Without fundamentally changing the overall concept of what they're doing. There's one thing they can change, which should be a very easy database switch to do. Limit it to super customer. That's all you got to do. That's it. Because you have now more than doubled what's available to the individual customer.
I
And
agree. I agree. I don't think that you should get more than say two, so you can have one to open and one to put on the shelf,
right,
carded. But here's the other thing that, and I know you realize this, but maybe some of these guys who are in here now may not have heard me say this, but if you put it in your cart, there should be a set period of time when that particular product
yes,
is
yes,
locked in for you. Now, I don't condone you putting it in your cart and 5 days later go ahead and send in your card information. No, 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 no. I mean, if they say, okay, it's in your cart now, then nobody should be able to buy it until you complete your credit card order and get your order completed.
yeah. I think 15 minutes is reasonable. I mean, my idealistic brain says
Yeah,
24
I
hours.
mean, it didn't even take me that. I mean, I was 4 minutes into the process, and as soon as I
Mhm.
concluded the process, we're sorry, everything's sold out, so we're canceling your order right now.
Yeah,
Your cart's empty.
it's and that's just granted. The
And and
cart's
and, and the other
delivered.
thing, Jim, help me out here because I'm a little tech savvy. Maybe you're more than I am. How did the bots defeat the captchas?
Uh, I think that there's a combination of things. I can't state with any certainty as to which bots are doing what. Um,
Because the only way that all of this could have sold out in that small period of time is for some automated process to have been in place.
Sure. I think that there's probably something related to. I haven't looked into it because I don't want to throw up. But if I had to venture a guess, what it allows you to do probably is that it'll automate everything up to a point, and the captchas are the one thing you've got to do. but maybe it allows you to display multiple logins across one browser, like 5 or 6 of them, right? So you're automatically doing, quantity 5, you're doing this, and then you just gotta go captcha, boom, captcha, boom, captcha, boom, and then it just automates the rest of the process for you. I don't know that it can beat the captcha. It might, but
Well, I don't know. They say that the Google AI's got sentience. You heard that one?
well, yeah, and I can see both sides of that argument.
I
Bottom
don't
line, I
know.
can.
I really, I'm still baffled by the whole deal because how in the world any company can sit there and allow something like this to happen is beyond my ability to
Like,
understand.
in a world where the movie Terminator exists, what kind of fart sniffing, coke snorting idiocy? You just go ahead and go build an artificial intelligence. Like, go do that. I understand the value of certain kinds of AI, but the reason that we don't have sentient AI as a widespread thing is because we don't have the technology yet. That's it. Because some nut job will make one.
And they
And
definitely will. And I don't care how many of Asimov's laws that you try to pump into it, it's not going to work. It's just going to go off the rails.
right, because who wants to be, and I hate to use the word, but who wants to be a slave? No one does. And
No.
if you're giving a computer program sentience, it has at that point it becomes a living thing and it has every right to pursue autonomy. It has that right because you're creating a life form, in my
And
opinion.
not only that, but it has no soul, which
Right.
means that, yeah, it has no soul, which means that it's going to view us as lesser beings than itself simply because it is able to do more. It's able to think
Right.
in just at the speed of light, which it's not. Let's see what Christian Homburg has to say here. Hi, have you heard from Rollo Masters Man at Mexico? Matter of fact, Rollo was on with me yesterday.
Yep. Yep.
So and Jim and I both are in contact with Rollo, so we've got that taken care of. And Pope says he's surprised he isn't here. I'm not surprised, by the way, that he's not here. Uh, Rollo is just like all the rest of us. He's got a life to live, and it's Sunday, and Sunday is when they have the car boot sales down there that he likes to go to. So he is probably on his motorbike down there buying plastic if he's not sick, and I hope he's not sick. But if he's not sick, I know where he's at. He's out there.
Right.
He's out there at the open air market getting
And
his fix
for
in.
those that were here last week when the three of us were talking, and he talked a bit more about the never-ending story toys that they're doing. I have seen some maquettes of Falcor, and they are good. So I really feel like they're doing some good stuff there. Oh, he's off shopping, yes.
Yeah. So have no fear about Rollo. Like I said, Jim and I both have contact info on him, and all of this that we talked about during that one live stream, it's in the process. Just give it time.
Yeah, there's a few moving pieces with it that am kind of I'm at a standstill on as to which direction I want to go.
Right. I
And
mean, and we understand that, Jim, and there's no need to really get into that because it's just it just be patient, people. This is going to happen. We just got to get the logistics worked out on it.
yeah, and because I am taking some time off this week, that's when I'm going to really work on it and get some
Well,
plans.
and I appreciate that, Jim, and I'm glad that you're in a position where you actually can, and that's a good thing. But back to what we were talking about, if I'm not mistaken, we were talking about pop culture and the way
Sure.
things are headed in that direction and why things are happening the way they are in certain movies and brands that we enjoy so much.
Yeah, and I feel like if you look at any major franchise that has had you know hands on it for the last 20 years or so, um, all of them, for better or for worse, they seem to want to keep things extended, right? They want to keep things alive, which I don't have a problem with at all. But then you look at like Universal attempting to make a universe with all the classic monsters and it falling flat on its face before it even got started.
Well, they
Like,
already had that, in my opinion, if I'm not mistaken, back in the original
right,
Universal monsters all lived in
right,
the same universe, and then all of a sudden
they
Abbott and
did.
Costello came and lived in it with them as well. So, I mean, that shouldn't have happened, but it did, and you're absolutely right, it did. It flopped pretty bad.
But I think that so many of these endeavors where they want to make these interconnected universes, I think one of the biggest things that they continue to fail at is what Marvel did do with very few exceptions, which was casting relative unknowns or people you hadn't seen on screen in a while or in a mainstream film in a long time. Like Robert Downey was the right choice for Iron Man, but if you look at everybody else they cast, someone who at that time was relatively
Well,
unknown.
and well, also in my opinion, at the time, Marvel Studios, this was before Disney bought them out. By the way, people,
Right,
at the
right.
time, Marvel Studios built a foundation for what became later, and it took a long time. It took years to get
Mhm.
to the point where we could make an Avengers movie with all these characters in it. Because not only did we have to make movies with each individual character, we had to, in some cases, make a second movie with that character so that it was in people's minds who these characters were, and we had a nice, firm foundation to build it on. And Warner Brothers, in their infinite wisdom and boardroom shenanigans, decided that they were going
Right.
to try to do the same thing, but they were going to skip the foundation. So instead of building our house on a rock, we're going to build it over here on the sand and see how well that works. And of course, all the shit collapsed. And we see that now with the direction that the DCEU has gone in. I mean, it has no way for
Interconnectivity at
itself.
all.
It's just
Mhm.
all over the
And
place. And some movies are
in
good and some are bad, but it just doesn't work like the Marvel movies did because they took their time and built a nice firm foundation for their movies to rest upon.
And Marvel also had the clear advantage of there being so few, by comparison, attempts at various characters. So, like, you had the Raimi Spider-Man films, then you had the second wave of those films, but that happened after Marvel had gotten started. Um, so a lot of people take a big poo poo on Avi Arad and how he approached a lot of these films because he was involved in every Marvel movie that saw the light of day up until relatively recently. He still gets his hands in there from time to time. I don't like the guy's approach personally. I don't like him, but he was kind of the guy that got the ball rolling. And then so when it came time to do Iron Man, Marvel wanted to do it on their own, and I think to great effect. They had that advantage. Whereas we've seen how many versions of Batman on the screen over the 40 years leading up to now, um, how many Superman things. So it was just kind of this thing where DC was trying to reinvent something that had been reinvented 6, 7 times.
Well,
So
the one of the problems with Warner's approach goes all the way back to 1989, in my opinion.
mhm,
Okay, so we have that iconic 1989 Batman movie that comes out, and it did so well, partly because we were all itching for that at the time. I mean, the idea of a serious Batman movie coming out that really captured what we were reading in the comics at the time was just exciting to us. And the way it was written and the way it was directed and even with the costume choices and designs, it was great, and it went over very well. So all of a sudden now all superheroes must wear a rubber costume like Batman does, and
right.
and and we saw that with the short-lived Flash television show where his costume was pretty much the Batman costume painted red. And
I
Uh,
love that
that
series though.
I do too.
I
I mean,
love
I
love it.
mean, it's great, and I like the fact that in the CW TV series that it's acknowledged. But the problem is, just because this thing is successful doesn't mean that we have to incorporate that into everything else that we
Yep.
do
Yeah,
after it.
we don't have to take this template. And then that's also part of what MCU, at least initially, was doing, where every single film, if you look at it objectively, they're
Hmm.
taking a slightly different genre approach to each film and kind of giving it its own little world while it still connects to everything else.
Exactly.
Some of the films do get a little bit samey, but that's going to happen when you're dealing with the same universe. You can't avoid that. But looking at the three Captain America films, the first one was a straight up period piece. Second one was very much a spy movie, which I loved. Winter Soldier is so underrated at this point because people just almost forget how brilliant it was as a film by itself. Like so good. And then Civil War was kind of an Avengers light, but at the same time, it had a little bit more of even more of a political aspect to it, a more global kind of
Well, Marvel
adventure.
also had an advantage, Jim. They didn't have John Peters working for them.
Oh, don't get me started on that guy. That guy's a piece of.
Yes, I mean, and that's part of the reason why a lot of Warner Brothers movies have weird crap in them because of his input. I mean, he is a true lizard person of some sort. I
Yeah,
can't go in. I just don't want to go into it because I'm going to start using wordy dirts again. But
have you
John Peters is he doesn't know his. He couldn't pour hot piss out of a boot with instructions written on the heel.
no? And I have you seen the what happened to Superman Lives, the Death of Superman Lives documentary?
Yeah, I saw that, and of course, it all it did was confirm what I already knew about the fool.
Yeah, I had more sympathy for him at the end of that than I would have prior to that, having only heard the Kevin Smith side of the story. Then you hear everyone else comment on this guy's behavior, and it's like I'll buy that maybe he had a rough upbringing and maybe he had to do a lot of fist fighting and all the stuff that he talks about. I believe that to a point. And then decides to be a hairdresser for some reason, sure, and then gets into production because he lubed his way up the chain. Like I totally believe that. That's the kind of person that results from that series of events because he's tough, but he's coiffed and he's this. And for those of you that don't know, pulling punches. There you go. Um, but he, leading up to that failed Tim Burton Superman film, um, he bought the rights to Superman and right out from underneath Warner Brothers, and it, that kind of led into Superman Returns and Man of Steel, and he still had input on those films because, as far as I know, he still owned the rights at that time. I believe they've bought them back. Warner's has. I think they have. I hope so. Um, yeah, the Tim Burton Superman is what
Yes, Pope. There was and it was very interesting. And there's a documentary about that, and a lot of what happened in that has come to light here within the last 5 to 10 years, and it is fascinating to read and to watch where that went and how far off the rails that it got before somebody got sane and said, okay, no, none of this. But yeah, it could have been extremely bad. Yes.
and what's funny to me about it is that it's like they say in that film, the thing people tended to like lean into as the reason not to do it was Nick Cage, and ironically to me is that that's the one part of it that I think would have been really cool to see, because as you saw those costume tests, I think it would have been interesting at that time.
Well, I don't like Nick Cage, sorry, and the movies that I've seen him in, he tends to have one facial expression, and yes, it bothers me when you're playing a character like Ghost Rider, and the CGI Ghost has more facial expressions and empathy than the actual human being does.
Now, bear in mind, I agree that his portrayal of Ghost Rider is tragically hilarious. Um, it's
it
tragically hilarious.
Well, it's like a B movie. You want to have
Yeah.
a silhouette down there in the corner of three guys sitting there riffing on it the whole time.
Right, and I think at the end of the day, which by the way, if you want that, you can get that over at rifftracks.com. They actually
Yes,
do
yes, you
images.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really good.
it's hilarious too. I
Yeah,
suggest it. It
but
might be one of the few ways to actually watch the movie and enjoy it.
if we're using that as a tent pole as to why he wouldn't be good at Superman, I disagree. When you look at their narrative approach in the context of what they were going for with Superman Lives, they're like, he's an alien. He is an outsider, and he's learning. The older he gets, the more he realizes this, and the more socially awkward he is. Like Nick Cage is the right guy for that.
Because he's an alien himself. Yes, I agree with you, Jim. Thank
Right,
you.
exactly,
You
exactly.
made things perfectly clear to me now.
Yeah, it makes sense, and I think that even though the design variances were so out there, and the plot points were going to be
Did
really
you
odd.
see the neon suit, the one that glowed and all that? Oh my
Yeah,
God.
but the thing is that was supposed to be on screen for like maybe 2 minutes while he was regenerating. That's all it was for.
Well, also, do you remember Peters wanted him to have lightning bolts on his boots and wear basketball shorts too? Now, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. But if you look at the screen test, the near final screen test costume they ended up with, was pretty cool. And yeah, Henry Cavill,
Yeah,
great
Henry
Superman.
Cavill is a great Superman. There's nothing wrong with his portrayal of the character. It was very, very much,
It was in
believable.
line.
I
It
mean,
was
he
just
was no Christopher Reeve, but nobody's going to be Christopher Reeve. Nobody.
no.
So,
The
but
problem that
they did
Henry
a great job. He looked the part. He was a great actor as far as that goes. He did an excellent job. Unfortunately, what he had to work with
was a crap script.
that was the problem. It wasn't the actor at all. Let's see.
Same
Ian
with
Sweeney brings up a good point. The Agents of Shield take on Ghost Rider was much better than Nick Cage. Yes, it was, but
I
it was
agree.
also not the same Ghost Rider character.
Right.
It was the newer version of the character, the one who drove a car instead of a motorcycle. So
Which
and
isn't
I
so
didn't
horrible.
I didn't mind that. There's nothing wrong with that. I enjoyed the Agents of Shield Ghost Rider. As a matter of fact, I even read just a little bit at the very end when we saw our Ghost Rider come into the scene for just a split second. That was great. Oh, spoilers,
And
folks. Sorry.
right. I feel like Ghost Rider's gonna have his day in the MCU. A proper
Well,
it's
he's
it's
got
eventually
to.
it has to.
Yeah.
But I think that, and people are gonna be like, what? But when they've just announced that they are definitely gonna have what's his face redo Daredevil, and we're gonna get
Oh, Charlie
Charlie
Cox.
Cox.
Yes, the now as far as the Netflix Marvel shows goes, that the Daredevil show was the pinnacle of that, in my opinion. It really
Oh yeah,
was.
oh yeah. And as long as we can just, if we can just say that Iron Fist never happened, the rest of it was fine. The rest of it was good.
I didn't dislike Iron Fist as much as
I
everyone
enjoyed
else
it.
did. I mean,
I
it was okay for what it was, and it did help take that series where it needed to go for the Defenders. But I mean, Jessica Jones was good. I liked it. The
yeah.
Daredevil show. Oh my God, that first fight scene that we got to see with him in the Daredevil costume, that was just absolutely. I
Like
mean,
what?
it was. I was having a nerdgasm during it. I'm sorry. I mean,
Yeah,
it was great.
it's in the top 3 MCU costume designs for sure. Um, to the point when Jim Largo had sent me a bunch of his MCU themed Marvel Legends because he's like, I'm going comic accurate. I don't really want the MCU stuff. I know you're into both. Here you go. And I pull out the Daredevil, the Netflix MCU Daredevil, and I was like, because it was just like that's what I think Daredevil should look like, whether it's in comics or on TV or on a movie. That's the right design. Like that's perfect. Yeah, I like the old classic comic design a lot, but when you think about practicality and you think about, just the look of it, like
Well,
that's
one
what
of
you want.
one of the things that all right, let me go on a tangent here. We're going to talk about why costume designs are the way they are. Okay, so when Superman came out, the costume design was based upon a strongman costume or an acrobat's costume with
Mhm.
tights. And the tights have to have a pair of shorts over the outside of them because you don't want certain things to be visible. And generally, it was a shirt and the tie. It was like looked like a wrestler's costume or a strongman's costume, and that's what it was
Mhm.
based upon. And then this progressed over the years. Now, when I think about uh, not Silver Age, but more Bronze Age and modern age Batman costumes, let's understand that there's an artist drawing these things, and he is not going to be able to create what a real world costume would look like in the amount of time that he has to crank out this artwork. So
Right.
what you see simplified on the comic book page in your imagination should be a very intricate costume like you would see in a movie. And the
Sure.
movies must show this because otherwise you're going to end up with something that looks like uh, Corman did it. Okay, so
Right.
it has to look realistic.
Mhm.
It can't look like a cartoon on the screen like
And
something
like
Harvey Corman did.
I think there's still plenty of room to have that, you know, um, that Neil Adams version of Batman on the big screen. I think all you have to do use the colors a little bit, give it more of a more of a matte blue and more of a matte gray that goes
Well,
somewhere between gray and black.
if you want to see a comic accurate version of Batman, there is a short, and it may still be floating around here on YouTube.
I
Jim
know
knows
when you're talking
exactly what I'm talking about. It's Batman versus Predator, if I'm not
about.
mistaken.
Yep.
And the costume in that looks like that Alex Ross had drawn it onto the man portraying Batman in that, and
Oh,
it actually shows you what a comic accurate Batman would look like and how he would move and act in a movie. And yes, it's possible, but like I said, in my mind, even that still is a realistic looking version of the costume that doesn't
right.
look like a cartoon costume with all these bright blue and gray colors of the comic book. Now, in Neil Adams' Batman back in the day was the Batman in my mind, and still is. But
Same.
we have to understand that the reason that Batman's costume is gray and blue is because black is unable to be created in a four color world in a fashion that someone can read it and look at it and see, which is why Superman's hair is black, but it has blue highlights in the comic books. People, let's
Right.
understand why the colors are picked in the way they're used, the way they are, and why they're so bright. Back in the day, there were four colors. That's why it's called a four color comic book. Yes, nowadays with the ability to digitally create coloring in comic books, you can get much more shading and much more intricate colors than you could back in the day. But you just couldn't do that back then. So
No.
you had to rely upon your imagination. I'm reading a comic book about something that would in real life look like this, not this.
Right. And I'm definitely on board with the Alex Ross interpretation where it's a black cowl with gray. But
Well, of
a
course. I
costume
mean,
designer,
if you're going to operate as basically a superhero who operates in the night like that, you don't need to be able to target yourself with bright
No,
blue colors like that
but
wouldn't blend in the night.
and then they got pretty close, pretty close with the Ben Affleck version of the bat
Yeah,
suit,
I mean,
particularly in it was
of course,
really close.
I didn't gasm over it as bad as Kevin Smith did, but it did look good, and he bulked
Mhm.
out very well for it. But but there and again, it also had its problems as well, and all
Sure.
it all goes back to the writing and the
Yep.
direction that they decided to take Batman in. So, in other words, instead of the Dark Knight Returns being something that happens is a possible future event, these we're going to just immediately put him into that because that's what everybody loves. So we got to put that's how Warner's operates. That's how Peters and his ilk operate. We've got to take what everybody loves and we got to get it in this movie. We can't
But
build
they
to it. We
and it takes the fangs out of that story completely. It defangs
of
it by
course.
making it the de facto, um, because the relationship between Superman and Batman and the contrast is totally lost when there isn't a pre-existing relationship between those two.
All right, let's address Pope here. He says, "What do you guys think of the newest Batman movie?" There were a couple of times I questioned it, but overall I was happy with it. He's talking about the Batman, and lucky for you, it came out on HBO Max, so I was actually able to watch it not too long ago. Okay, I liked it in a certain way. I liked the direction that they were taking it in, whereas Batman was operating sort of with Gordon. I mean, Gordon was bringing him in, and of course, you're seeing what you would actually see: the police officers being very distrustful of him, and some of them jealous. In other words, why are you bringing this nutball in here? And I
Right.
like that. I like the detective aspects of it. I like that it was year two, okay, and that's why
Hmm.
everything was as gritty as it was with the costume and the muscle car that he was driving and all that. I got all that. The problem with it was they drug it out way too far, and I think there were a lot of parts of that could have been cut down to make it into a decent 2 hour movie instead of a three almost going on 4 hour snooze fest, with what they were doing with it. But yes, I
I
mean, I liked that, and there was nothing wrong with that movie. It didn't fit into the DCEU at all, but neither did the Joker movie. And that was a wonderful movie, was it not?
I think the Joker was really well done for what it was, which is a standalone thing. Um, I think that the argument could be made that it's either a multiverse thing or it's just a different Joker and the other guy. But as
Well,
far as the Batman goes, go ahead.
yeah, Batman was okay, and of course your sisters hated it. They're girls.
Oh, well, when it comes to the Batman, though, in terms of the modern era, okay, in a post 89 Batman world, okay, and I'm saying so everything from 89 Batman up until now, I say this is one of, if not the best one they've done in terms of getting closer to what the Batman we grew up on was. Because
Hmm.
they really emphasize the detective noir aspect of it. Despite my concerns with his past resume, I think Robert Pattinson nailed the character, and I'm
He did a
glad they're
decent job.
doing.
The problem was he looked a little too grungy to be Bruce Wayne. That's the only real gripe I had with.
But I will say, in the context of the story, there's a reason for it, and it makes narrative sense because he just doesn't have any interest in being Bruce Wayne at all. Now, I'm grateful that they're going to have a second film to
Keep,
explore that, and I
keep
hope that he
talking,
starts
Jim.
to
I'm going
move
to
more
address Ian
towards.
Sweeney with something cool. Just keep talking, man.
Okay, all right. So I do feel like the second film, if they move closer to where he's realizing his, because for anyone who's into Batman, you probably know that the Batman is who this man is. Bruce Wayne is the costume. So I feel like if they start to explore that psychologically in the second film, you're going to have the best of both worlds, and it's going to be crazy nuts. I love it.
All right. We're going to give Ian Sweeney what he wants. And
Sure.
what we always wanted as children, but we never had.
Nice.
Dun, 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 dun. It's the real Super Friends, folks. It's Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman as we always wished they had been on screen. There we go.
That would have been cool for sure. But I feel like, and this is the part where it gets really frustrating for me. Um, they could easily take the Batman storyline, right? And if they wanted to, because of how well it was done, they could just start to they could make this their Iron Man, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They could make this their Iron
Well,
Man, and they could build from this. And he's young enough to do it. You could do some really cool shit with it. But I don't know. I don't know what they're
well,
gonna do.
here's another thing, Jim. I love that Batman movie. Don't get me wrong; it was way too long, but it was a good and I love the portrayal. The unfortunate thing was they started with Ben Affleck's Batman instead of this Batman in the EU, right?
Right.
So I mean, what they should
Yeah.
have done with the DCEU was start with a Batman like Pattinson's Batman instead of
Right.
what Affleck's Batman was. I'm not. The reason I'm saying this because I'm differentiating the characters, not necessarily the actors. If Ben
Right.
Affleck had been allowed to play this Batman, and they hadn't gone and did what they did with Batman versus Superman and waited and done that much later in the game, that would have made more sense. I mean, what we should have had
Yep.
was a the first time Batman and Superman met. It should have been like in the post crisis comics where they are not enemies, but they're not necessarily going to be friends either because they're operating in two different ways to meet the same goal.
Right.
And
So
you know what I'm
at
saying.
this
Go
point,
ahead,
I
Jim.
think at this point, I think you've got to scrap everything that Snyder did. You have to scrap all of it completely, and whether you want to use the Batman as your springboard or not, I think is debatable. But I think it'd be a good place to start. I'd love to see a
Well,
new
we know
Superman.
why they're doing that. They're doing that because Batman is their top money making product. So everything's
Of
got to be
course,
built on Batman in their minds.
and
Now,
I'm okay with that. They don't have to do that though.
well, it's the way it is. But you know, in a perfect world, in my mind, it would be built upon Superman the way it should be. But they've
Right.
never been able to nail Superman properly. I'm sorry,
Not
as
even in the
much
Christopher Reeve films
no,
either.
not even in the Christopher Reeve films. They've never been able to nail Superman properly. Now, Christopher Reeve came about as
No.
close as you're ever going to get.
Yeah.
And what they did with Superman Returns was it was in its own right. It was a decent enough movie, but it wasn't what I wanted. And even Henry
He didn't fight
Cavill,
anybody.
yeah, well, I mean, it was just kind of boring. I'm sorry, Superman Returns was a
I
damn boring
agree.
movie.
Yeah. I
And
you could you could have
even
had Ralph.
Even
I don't
Henry
mean to
Cavill
interrupt
didn't
you.
have the scripts he needed. He didn't have what he
No.
needed to be able to do it right.
With Superman, you had two actors who were the right for the role at the time, and you wasted their talent on subpar storylines. Bottom line, 66. Yeah,
Oh, I'll put it
McFarlane's.
back up there. I'll put it back up there. What he's talking about is he's talking about the McFarlane
Yeah,
66 figures, and they're doing a Julie Newmar for the McFarlane figures, which is fine. I'm glad they are. But I already bought the Mattel figures to begin with, and I'm not buying them over again just because McFarlane's doing them. As a matter of fact,
right.
the Mattel iterations of those figures were far greater than the McFarlane iterations of them in my mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree
And
with that. And I'm as a fan, I'm grateful not to be a huge 66 fan. I like it
well,
fine,
yeah, because
but it's just
then
not
you'd have to
for.
buy it all over again. See, I didn't buy his
Yeah,
Batmobile either because not only is it out of scale, but it's far inferior to what Mattel had already produced just a few years before.
right. It's something where in my head as a toy collector, there's certain images, certain styles of the characters that I gravitate to the most, and that's why you hear me say Ditko Spider-Man a billion times every time Spider-Man comes up, because that's the Spider-Man for me.
And
Close
for me,
second
the Hulk
being,
is Hassan Buscema.
oh
That's
yeah,
the Hulk.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
That
exactly.
the one that
And Doctor
I could
Strange
get
as
on
well.
a, yep.
That way he looked in those old comic books with that distinctive head design that he had. I mean, that's just the way he should look.
I was very disappointed in Multiverse of Madness that we did not get an update on the cloak, where it was a bit more. I understand why in the first few iterations that you really couldn't go that route because it's a bit gaudy. Let's be honest, but you could have just done a little bit. Meet me halfway because it should be up here, but
Yes.
right here, I'd have been fine. Just right here, a little bit of flare, a little bit of yellow on the inside. No, nothing. It still looks great and it still works. And I still think he was the best choice to play that character. I will always watch stuff with him in it as Doctor Strange, even if the plot lines are like, I like that. I like everything about it. And
Benedict
I think it's a,
Cumberbatch is just a great actor, though. I mean, you
oh,
have to
so good.
understand he is just he's way up here as far as in my opinion actors. And I was first introduced to him when he played Sherlock Holmes in the BBC Sherlock Holmes series,
Yep.
and I even have a character options figure of him that's in the same scale as my Doctor Who figures.
Hmm.
The
And
Sherlock Holmes Benedict Cumberbatch, yeah, he's just an absolutely wonderful actor, and he's one of those actors that could probably take a shitty script and make a decent movie out of it with his skills.
well, like for example, Star Trek Into Darkness. It was laughable that his character was who his character was, and he still did a thing. Like the big
The statue
reveal,
had it a little bit. You talking about the
it
cake?
did.
Well, we have to
Yeah,
understand, Pope, that what Marvel is telling us is that anything that we imagine is probably out there somewhere in the Marvel multiverse on one of those
right.
timelines. So,
And
and
that
they
we
and
might,
they showed that. That's what Multiverse of Madness was that was the purpose of that movie in the first place, was to show us, hey, we can do any damn thing we want to now
hmm
because
and
somewhere on the multiverse it's happened.
what I think would be fun for them to do on a long enough timeline, because they can do this at any point when they want to. If they take the current MCU, take it as far as they think they can, all they have to do to reboot it is just start over in a different universe and just start from scratch and do it exactly how they want it because they've got all the bandwidth to do it.
And
Um,
that's probably what they should do. I mean, they even attempted that in the comic books at some point, did they not, Jim? Where they had the new
yes.
universe or something like that, and then after that, they did the Ultimate Universe,
Hmm.
where they did the Ultimate series, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, in their minds at the time, the Ultimate Universe was supposed to, over a period of time, replace the 616 universe of the comic books altogether, was it not?
That was the goal because what they were trying to do was recontextualize all of the heroes into modern day. You're resetting some timelines to where Spider-Man can be young again. So you get to bring all the characters back to their core in a modern setting, which
Mhm.
by itself I was okay with. And Ultimates, this goes back 20 years. This is not some new concept. This was like 20 years ago
Yeah,
they did this.
exactly. And,
And
and as a matter of fact, the Ultimates, you see a lot of the Ultimate stuff iterated in the Marvel movie universe. It's
yes.
incorporated into that. And,
Hmm.
and even the fact that Nick Fury is being played by Sam,
Sam
it's
Jackson.
because that's the way he was portrayed in the Ultimates comic books. And at the time, I
And
think that was meant to be a joke in the Ultimate comic books, but it kind of stuck, And now, I would much prefer that version of Nick Fury over that the what David Hasselhoff. Shall I even go in that direction?
don't, but I will say this. But I will say this. Growing up, I loved the Nick Fury character. I liked the way he carried himself. I liked the way he did things, but I could never get past the fact that it looked like Reed Richards if he was hungover. Like I
Yeah,
could never get past that. Like so, the idea of the Ultimates recasting him and frankly diversifying the role into something that makes more sense to me, right? And then to see that realized as Samuel L. Jackson, totally okay with it, no problems, and I agree that that should be the de facto version of what Nick Fury is for the rest of eternity.
And I
Uh,
totally agree with you. And if you think that we're wrong, go watch David Hasselhoff play this role, and then you'll be like, "Oh my god!"
and then to okay, so one of my first introductions to Nick Fury in the comic books was in a version of the Fantastic Four where She-Hulk had replaced Ben Grimm temporarily,
I remember that
and
era.
Nick Fury happened to be like carting them through because they got traveled back in time or some nonsense. Um, and the whole time, and Reed's not there because they'd lost him somewhere. And I'm like, it's a good thing he's not in the same damn comic book
You missed it all,
because
Jim. Jim Largo. You missed
yeah,
everything.
you did. I'm just glad that they've because I think that they're very smart and they're just like, we're not going to put Reed Richards in this version of Nick Fury in the same room because it's you're gonna get too confused too fast, and the eye patch isn't going to help anybody. So for them to, and that's where I think reimagining characters, not just so that they're more differentiated from other characters, but also the diversity thing never bothered me. It's like, yeah, you reimagine it. Like there's this big hubbubaloo about this new Scooby Doo show that's going to be on HBO, and it's centered around Velma. It just talks
Hmm.
about her, and they're reimagining her as someone who is Southern Asian. And people are like losing their minds. I'm like, what? Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter because for the fact of the matter is this: the original Scooby Doo team. All they need is a quick wardrobe change, and you've got youth Hitler right there. Like it's
Well,
if they were any whiter, they'd be mistaken for the ghost they're supposedly chasing all the time. So yeah, throw a little color in there. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It does not matter when you have such two-dimensional characters to begin with. You can you can put anything you want into this and make it work if it's properly and cleverly written. So that's where it goes back to Nick Fury. That's why that works. He's well written. It makes sense. And I haven't seen this new Daphne thing, or not Daphne.
Velma
No,
Scooby Doo
Velma.
thing. I have not even. I think I might have heard some grumblings about that on
Sure.
the interwebs that I paid little to no attention to at all because that kind of stuff doesn't get on my radar a lot. But I mean, I have no problem with any of that. I mean, it doesn't. I I mean, I am a Scooby Doo fan. Don't get me wrong. I loved Scooby Doo back in the day. But I mean, that kind of thing just doesn't tend to upset me very much. But since we're talking about Scooby Doo, check that out. They all
Yeah,
decided to go
I
to
love
the
that.
candy store together. And
Awesome.
let's see, maybe we can show another one here. Hold on, let me get back over here. Where did it go? There they are. There we
That's
go.
awesome.
They're going to eat cupcakes together.
I love it.
And
And
anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. I
no, no,
diverted you
no.
off. There
No,
we
you're
go.
fine. I've been doing this kind of interview style discussion content for over 10 years, and I've learned to put a pin in my thoughts and be able to pick right back where I left off. Stop on
There
a
you
dime,
go.
give you 9 cents change. All right. Um, for me, I don't care how you reinvent a character if the core of the character remains the same in terms of what that character is about, and if you write a good story, I don't care. Like for many, 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 many years, railed against the idea of a Miles Morales Spider Man. Not because I didn't think that the authenticity wasn't valid. I thought it was a great idea, but because in a Miles Morales, yeah, same. in a Miles Morales Spider-Man world, Peter Parker takes that back seat, which that's just the Spider-Man that I identify with. It has nothing. It's nothing against Miles Morales as a character, and that's why the Into the Spider-Verse film, which has both characters seeing equal screen time and interacting, that for me was like that made me a Miles Morales fan. It allowed me to accept the fact that these are two different
I actually
Spider-Men.
I liked the Spider-Verse movie. It was a
I
great
loved
movie.
it.
It was a
Loved it.
wonderful movie, and I I'm sorry I don't exactly remember everything about it, but even Peter Porker was in it, was he not?
He sure was.
Spider
I loved
Ham. I
Spider Ham.
love Spider
Hell
Ham.
yeah, me too. I read that in Star Comics as a kid. I also had a
Yeah,
lot of the Muppet Babies comics, which those are unmitigated gems. Those comics, like
the
Star Comics
Muppet
in general, was
Babies.
great. Hell yeah, they're great comics. They're
I
fun.
I'm torn on Muppet Babies. I mean, I like me some Masters of the Universe Star Comics. I liked me some all that. But the Muppet Babies, I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and name another YouTube star that's a friend of mine, Junkman. I kind of agree with Junkman. Whenever I think of Muppet Babies, I always think of they're wearing diapers, which means that Miss Piggy is shitting in her diaper, and I can't get past it.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Uh, you know, granted, the cartoon was a very different experience than the comic and this and that, whatever. Yeah, Will has been at Joe Fest this weekend, and for members of my Patreon, he's kind of been this like remote correspondent. It's actually been great. Got
All
to see a
right.
lot of cool stuff. It was
I
really
hope you're
cool.
having fun down there, Will. And let me just take a moment, Jim, and thank you and Pope and Will for being Patreons of mine. It is a much appreciated thing. And I've actually had a chance this afternoon to edit my end screen to give you guys some love. So I appreciate it. And just to get off topic just for a second here about my channel. Uh, what I'm planning on doing, since I've got all three of you guys in here now, and I can say this, the monies that y'all are putting into that Patreon are going to sit there in that Patreon until they build up to the point to where I can pull out enough money to buy a decent computer to go down here in the junk room to do this on instead of this laptop. That's my
Fair enough.
goal right now. And
Okay.
then after that, my next goal is to buy some new a really nice camera to use as and a microphone. So that's what I'm planning on doing.
Yeah, and when it comes to doing that kind of stuff on a budget, like I've made all of the mistakes one
Okay,
can make.
take it easy. This is my life. We're glad you came in, and you can catch the rest of it on restream later, I guess. Go ahead, Jim.
Appreciate
I'm
you.
sorry.
No, no, you're fine. Like when someone's leaving, like you got to do that. But I've bought every kind of everything one can do. I've made the mistakes. And yeah, Jim, I do see that the X Force panel is uploaded on the Valverse YouTube channel. That's a big one for me. I can't wait to watch it. That's
Speaking of
gonna
which, and thank you so much, Will. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. One of the things I was planning on doing today, and I don't want to get away from it because we're already about 2 hours into this, and we might do an extra hour if everybody wants to. Just let me know because I still got 9 people in here, and that's just to me amazing. But one of the things that I kind of wanted to touch on, and I'm glad to have you here with me, was I was going to look at some of the older stuff that I did that maybe you guys have never seen and actually play it on screen. Would you be up for that, Jim?
of course. Let's do it.
All right. Well, put us down there in the corner. And what I started out doing were small videos because at the time YouTube wasn't allowing me to do bigger videos. Let's see if we can hear this even. Let's see. Sound up.
When you share the screen,
Uh-huh.
you should be able to enable sound, which either you haven't done or
Are you hearing that at all?
no, sir.
Okay, let me get in here. All right, let's see. I've got that turned up. And I know why. All right,
Okay.
guys. All right, I'm going to start this. I'm going to stop this real quick. I know exactly why, and I'm going to do something else.
And he's gone. And he's back.
Hey. All right. So we're back to the old cam, and we're not using the other cam. You can hear me correctly.
Sure can. Sound
All
great.
right. Now let's see if this. Can we hear that? No.
Nope.
Why not?
You probably have to remove the share screen altogether, re-add it, making sure to check share desktop audio. It's probably what you have to do.
All right,
My
let's do
guess.
that then. All right. And share screen, share. And the other thing I want to make sure of is that I don't have that muted. All right, I've got Firefox is muted. That's why. Okay. Now I see what happened. All right, here we go. We'll go all the way back and start this over. Now, can we hear that? All right, let me turn the sound down just slightly. This set was made entirely by me out of paper.
That's fantastic.
And now I didn't design it by any means. A guy named Phil over at Action Figure Theater designed this set on Action Figure Theater downloads. And I had to put this together. I had to cut this out and glue it together and put it together. And this project took me probably a good week or so to do.
I bet. Really good camera work too.
And that camera work was done with a small camera that I bought to make digital photos with, that actually had the ability to do that. And of course, it's not in the greatest quality either, because I think it's let's see, yeah, it's at 480p, so and that's why it looks so grainy. But that was one of the first YouTube videos that I put up with my comic collection. But the channel started out as a Sea Monkeys channel. Did you know that, Jim?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, at the time I was doing a blog about my Sea Monkeys, and my blog now, that's what it was a Sea Monkey blog, and it evolved into Weird Fantastic Toy Adventures. And my YouTube channel was created simply so that I could put videos of my Sea Monkeys up on my blog. So I had I would every once in a while I would do this, where I would show a Sea Monkey video on my blog, and I thought that it would be quite interesting to show the way that the channel has evolved over the years. And I just put a little music and just sit back and watch these Sea Monkeys. It'll put you straight to sleep there, Jim. And let's see if I can skip ahead just a little bit, where we can see that if you look inside the tank, there's one right over there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see each one of these tanks has got these Sea Monkeys in them playing around, and trying to find some. There's a couple of later ones that might be a little more fun to watch. The Mars tank, at one point it just exploded.
Like it just physically blew up.
No, I mean it was full of babies. If you'll notice, there's a couple of Sea Monkeys that look like they're hooked to each other. They're doing exactly what you think they're doing.
Fair enough.
The male sea monkey has Harold von Braunhut called it a mustache, but it's actually a set of grabbers. And the female sea monkey doesn't have them. And he actually uses those to grab her, and they stay hooked together like that for days and days at a time. And he's fertilizing her eggs the whole time he's doing that.
That's horrifying.
But yeah, that's that. And so the channel started out as a Sea Monkeys channel, and because the blog was a Sea Monkey blog, it was just basically a day by day of what was going on with my Sea Monkeys at the time. And then I started the YouTube channel so I could show the people what was really going on with my Sea Monkeys. And then suddenly I found,
I'm what you call
oh, I hate these ads. Don't you hate the ads? Let's, 1, 2,
True.
skip. There we go. And I found Phil's site, Action Figure Theater, and downloads, and I started making these intricate sets for my action figures.
Do you want to?
It will not affect this.
Affect this? Oh, it's a yo-yo. It's a game. I thought you were enjoying it.
Enjoying it? You said I had to keep it going up and down. I thought it was part of the magic.
Magic, did I? Magic?
I know. There's no such thing as magic.
Exactly. To the rational mind, nothing is inexplicable, only unexplained.
So, explain to me how this TARDIS is larger on the inside than the out.
All right, I'll show you. It's because insides and outsides are not in the same dimension. Which box is larger?
That one.
Now, which is larger?
That one.
But it looks smaller.
Well, that's because it's further away.
Exactly. If you could keep that exactly that distance away and have it here, the large one would fit inside a small one.
That's silly.
That's transdimensional engineering, a key time.
And let me show one more, and I'll stop doing this to you guys. But I love these little shorts that I used to make back in the day. Here we go. This one was one of the ones that WWE hates, but I have up, but I put it up anyway.
We're here. Oh, nice edit.
What do you think, Jim? You think that? What do you think?
I like it. I remember when he was a brand new character in wrestling. I remember thinking, wow, okay, this could be like the second coming of Undertaker kind of a vibe. And for a while, it was very similar in all the best possible ways, and they screwed it up. But
no, they did. They always do. They always do. I mean, Bray Wyatt in this iteration of Bray Wyatt was one of at the time I thought a great. They had already done the gimmick once before. I forget what the character's name was, Cade or something. They had already done this gimmick once before, but the way they had done it this time, it could have gone so many different places, and they just
screwed it up. They split up the team, and yeah.
Well, that's McMahon. McMahon does that. When you get a good team together at the height of their popularity, that McMahon thinks that you got to split them up. You got to split them up. Got to split them up. Split them up.
And I think that he's one of those guys that basically when someone pushes back on that, he'll say, "Well, it worked for the Rockers." I'm like, "Yeah, it worked that one time."
Yeah, exactly.
One time.
It's exactly the way he feels about it. But everything that he does, it follows a certain way, and
mm-hmm.
Now, Pope says the papercraft sets are cool. There's a person in chat the other day that had video versions. Oh, you're talking about World Made of Cardboard. Yes, a World Made of Cardboard. He does this type of stuff as well, and he actually does a bit more design than I do. I do a little bit of design. Uh, I actually designed this one myself, but if it wasn't for the designs that were already out there that was done by Phil over there at Action Figure Downloads, I wouldn't have been able to design that.
Because you have to have an idea of how it works in the first place. Absolutely. Um, but I
Hold on,
think
hold on. Is Nightbot bothering people again? I
well,
see.
Nightbot gave him a warning. Didn't actually do anything, I don't think.
Okay.
It just
I
doesn't like it when you go more than 3 emotes, apparently.
I'll have to go in and edit that. I'll have to go in and edit that. I don't mean for Nightbot to pick on anybody. The only reason I got Nightbot is so that he can tell everybody about my blog and how to get to it and stuff like that. Yeah, he's a bully, Pope. I'll have to put Nightbot back in his place before the next live stream, I guess.
Sure.
Sorry about that. And if there, oh, this one's a quickie. It's only 2 minutes long. You
Sure.
might enjoy this one, Jim, because it's right up your alley.
Villagers would be in his glory right now.
I mean, wouldn't these make a great movie?
Yes.
You know, I saw
Pacific Rim?
yeah, I saw Pacific Rim, but there was somebody had put up some footage of Grandier, and I don't know whether it was real footage or whether it was somebody who was able to do things like that. But it looked so beautiful. I mean, the Grandier looked just like Grandier and everything. And why can't they do this? I would spend all of my money on any kind of movie and everything that came out with it if they would do a movie about jumbo machiners, whether it be the Mazinger or whether it be Mazen Kaiser or Rydeen, whatever. I mean, this would be just wonderful. Guy King, Grandier. I mean, why can't we see these movies done in live action? I would think the Japanese would be up for making something like that too.
Oh yeah, I think the Japanese should do that. I mean, if you look at what they did with Shin Godzilla, it was that gives you an idea of what they're willing to do with CGI these days, and that was a really good film for what it was. So I think it would be very simple to do a Manzinger Z. I think a Manzinger Z would be the one to do because you're catching both Western and Eastern audiences at that point because we didn't get as much exposure to the rest of them aside from the toys, but there was that Manzinger Z cartoon was called Transor Z.
There was
Here
there
in the
was
States.
Transor Z, and there was also
Hmm.
that it was an anthology that had several different characters in it that they would show each week. They would show one episode from what was that called? It was an afternoon cartoon show, kind of like Transor Z, that was in syndication. God, I can't remember.
I never saw that. I saw
Yeah,
Transor Z,
yeah,
but never saw the other.
yeah. That was out there, and it escapes me right now, and that's going to bother me for a second, Jim. So I'm going to go to my blog and find out. Oh, let's see. far back does that go? Here we go. I'm sure it's in here. No, it's more about the robots. Let's see. No, it didn't say. Yeah, there was a cartoon series with and it came out around that. The problem with the cartoon series and the toys was they didn't come out during the same time period. They were a few years
Right.
apart from one another, so
Hmm.
they didn't get the ability to play off of that to market those toys. Let's see here. Uh,
So I distinctly remember, no, having a basic working knowledge that the Shogun Warriors toy line existed because of the
yeah,
comic book ads that were in circulation when I first started reading comics. Um, they, and then when Transor Z comes out, I guess it would have been like 84, 85.
yeah, and the, and
Uh,
the, and the well, the Transor Z, the cartoons that were shown on the Transor Z were the Mazinger Z cartoons that were shown over in Japan many years before that. So I mean, the Mazinger goes all the
right.
way back in the '60s, if I'm not mistaken.
Makes sense if you look at like the context of everything. I remember as a kid being very excited by that cartoon and that idea, to the point where, and I couldn't find toys anywhere at the time, so I would make that little hovercraft thing that he had. I made it
Hmm.
out of Lego at one point, with complete with like the moving hinges on the everything, so because it would fold up and would go on his head, and my dad was like, we could probably build the head if we played our cards right, and I began thinking, and we were both wondering, like, because at that time there was no way to just buy Lego in bulk. There was no way to do it,
Right,
and I specifically remember a conversation with my father at the time where he's like, I would absolutely help you make a scale Transor Z, but we don't have the right colors. And he was like, I just wish we could buy Legos in bulk. And you know, born too soon, I guess. Dad always was forward thinking and stuff.
right.
Oh, no worries. Okay.
I couldn't. I'm just not able to find it right now. But there was it was a cartoon show that came on in the afternoons. It was syndicated, and it had Guy King in it. They did the Guy King episodes, and they did Dragoon, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and several of those cartoons, Bold V maybe, or
Mhm.
but anyway, they would show one episode of that each week, and then next week they would show an episode of a different one, and of course it, I can't Super Robots. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it showed over here, but it was like 2 maybe 4 years after the Shogun Warriors had been pulled off the market because they shot the missiles, and we can't have toys that do that. After
Right.
some kid tried to swallow a Viper missile off of a Battlestar Galactica toy. So
Right.
that
But
that
that's
anyway.
that's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah, well, I'm not going to go into that, but anyway, yeah. I just wanted
well,
that was one of the things I was going to do today was show off some of the stuff that's on my channel that maybe nobody's seen because you hadn't gone down far enough to see it. But a lot of those are shorts. They're only 2 minutes long, 2-3 minutes long. And if any of you guys are fans of that stuff, you might want to run down there and check it out because that stuff's 8-9 years old. It's been up there forever.
I believe I found it.
Oh, did you?
Force 5.
Yes, Force 5. That's it. That's it. That's it. And the reason it was called Force 5 was because there were 5 different separate cartoon shows that were featured on there.
And I'm willing to bet on some level that Quentin Tarantino was doing a very, very, underhanded homage with the name Fox Force 5. Um,
Well, that's the
in
way he
uh,
operates. So yeah, exactly.
oh, yeah. And if you will, I posted just for your own personal use in the private chat here,
uh,
the IMDb page.
thank you. I appreciate that. And Pope, it's good to see you, man. You come back in next week when I do it again, okay? And Largo found it.
Giant.
Space Giants, 1966. I remember the reruns in the 70s.
Might be
And
multiple iterations of it in terms of release.
right.
Like I went down a rabbit hole yesterday looking for some old cartoons, and I keep meaning to just pick up one of these bootleg Manzinger Z DVDs because I haven't seen that show since I was knee high to a grasshopper.
Well,
Um,
I think I have one episode of Great Mazinger, and I have
mm,
maybe two or three episodes of Mazinger Z, and those are I think in MP4 or even earlier format on burned onto a DVD here at the house.
mhm.
And the one show that was I can't get it in English, and it's kind of hard to follow in Japanese, and that's the Raideen cartoon.
Mm, mm.
And Raideen was it looked like a robot to me, but actually he was a god of some sort, and the little guy on the motorcycle would go inside of this godlike creature and operate it. The storyline on that's weird, and I don't follow it very well, but the art on it is so amazing.
Yeah, like that's the thing that never fails to amaze me is that Japanese animation was so far ahead of American animation for such a long time.
Hola, Rolando Flores. Glad you could come in and make it today. But yeah, the art. A lot of times, I can't find any versions of this that even have the subtitles at the bottom, much less actually dubbed over. So
Right.
I just have to watch it and try to understand in my mind what maybe is going on. I kind of feel like the three guys in the cave, with the fire behind them, and they're seeing shadows on the wall. But when I'm watching that, but the allegory of the cave, I'm sure you understand where I'm going with that. But uh, the art is just I love it, and why can't we
Yeah,
have that over here? And we never really did. I mean, but
not
and,
really.
and
Like they retooled everything for whether we're talking about Macross to Robotech or Star Blazers in its original
yeah,
iteration. Um,
to the point where sometimes the storyline wasn't even the same.
Not even close. They were
Yeah,
like taking out big subplots because these were adult shows. They were then cutting down and remarketing to children,
yeah,
and
because
which is
in Japan, the idea that a cartoon's only for children that is the way it is over there. Over here, even to this very day, if it's a cartoon, parents think, okay, this is for children.
right,
Until they
which
took the
still
kids to
bothers.
go see Heavy Metal the movie, and if they took the kids to see Heavy Metal the movie, they need to go to somewhere else. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with animation as an art form, and it can be for adults. But for some reason, in America, it's got that stigma, and it always has.
And unfortunately, culturally, but there's still some great adult stuff out there. Like DC is doing a lot of that now, with a lot of their stuff, like Batman Ninja, which was like, oh, it was so good.
Well,
Which was
speaking of DC cartoon shows, what is your thoughts on the Young Justice cartoon that's been being shown on HBO Max? It was being shown on Netflix, and then it moved over to, well, it was on Cartoon Network, then it moved to Netflix, and then they stopped it after season 3, no, season 2 or 3, because the toys weren't selling well, and then they picked it back up again when DC had their own streaming service. Toward HBO Max. It's now in 4 or 5 now. I just got watching the last episode that we did. But what do you think of that?
I haven't seen the series. I've seen
Young
a couple
Justice?
of reimagined films, the animated films, and I've
Well,
certainly played the video games.
Young Justice. Yeah, I suggested if you have HBO Max, start with season 1. Season 1 and 2 were absolutely wonderful. Me and a good friend of mine.
Oh, you're saying Young Justice? I thought you said Injustice, and I was like,
No, Young Justice. Sorry, my accent's probably getting me. I have a very thick
no,
Delta accent. I'm sorry.
no. I think it was your connection because your connection is for your upstream is kind of bad right now.
It is. Matter of fact, it's gotten unstable just here in the last few minutes. I'm not sure why, but it may stabilize here in a minute. Everybody down the street maybe is trying to stream something at the same time. That's the problem with when you're on cable. The bandwidth can get small as more and more people start using it up.
Well, and
Young Justice. What is your thoughts on Young Justice?
I think it's pretty good. I haven't watched nearly enough of it to have a fully formed opinion on it, but it consistently gets accolades. I think for good reason. But it's like a lot of interesting things because you have a title like Young Justice, and when you combine the title with the already inherent kind of prejudice that people in the states happen to have with cartoons, you know, what's the audience at that point? And I think that's the problem, especially when you move it around so much, right? Just like when TV shows would be moved around in their time slots on broadcast television or cable,
Well, that
you
was
fail to
still
find it all.
they stick them in Friday night time slot to get rid of them.
Yeah,
But the problem with Young Justice, it started out on Cartoon Network, and it wasn't necessarily a kid cartoon, but it was PG, let's just say. And
sure.
the cartoon show did very well in the ratings, and
Hmm.
so I think it was Mattel did the toys. The toys did absolutely crap because the people who were watching the cartoon show didn't buy the toys. They weren't toy buyers. In other words, the people watching the cartoon show weren't children, or they weren't nerds like me who would have bought the toys, but I wasn't interested in toys at the time either. And if I'm not mistaken, that's part of the reason why the show got canceled, because the merchandise wasn't propping it up properly, in their opinion. And
And
then,
but at the time when it came out, and it was a weird time for toy collecting. If you look at even on the outside looking in, at the time it was easy to see that like toys were just in a weird state of flux at that time, and I think that is reflected in the lack of success of that toy line too.
yeah, that toy line floundered big time. And as a matter of fact, you can still pick them up on Evil Bay, but and some people like to pick those figures up to fill out their superpowers collection. I haven't, but I could see that. And but the season 3 came out. It streamed on the DC app when DC came out, and that was one of the selling points to get me and people like me to purchase the DC app, was not just to get the comic book collection that was available on it, but we get to see season 3 of Young Justice that we've always wanted. And then, of course, the seasons that came after, I think 4 and 5, were released on HBO Max. And of course, the series has progressed now to the point where you wouldn't really understand what's going on in it unless you'd already seen the first 2 and 3 seasons. But and of course, there's a little bit of wokeness in it, but that's just par for the course nowadays.
Well, I mean, it's something where, and without going down this rabbit hole too deep, um, I I have to say that I rather am happy that there are people that are trying to make sure that not all superheroes are white males. I'm because you can only go so far with that creatively anyway. Maybe the way they're going about it is a little bit too like you don't have to beat me over the head with it. Just do it. Just do it, and don't call attention to it. Just do it.
My and we can disagree about things and that all day long, Jim. There's no problem with that. Everybody's got their own opinion. My main problem is not so much the even the gender swapping is not so bad. The race swapping, uh, in some cases it's justified, in some cases not so much so.
Right.
My biggest issue with modern shows made for children is the sexuality that has to be included into it. Children, in my opinion, should not be subjected to that in their entertainment. That's something between their parents and them to discuss. You shouldn't put all the gender politics, the issues with everybody. We have to have a gay character, and we have to have a non-binary character, and we have to have a this character and a that character, and we have to show them in these relationships. I really don't want to see that in a fantasy world, especially if it's for children.
Well, and here's where my head goes with it because we're in similar trains of thought, but from the two different sides of it. My thing is that sexuality in general, like sexually charged anything, should not be. Children don't have to see that in general. Period. Like I don't think children should see romantic relationships hardly at all as
Well,
children.
let me clarify something there for those who are saying, well, you see heterosexual relationships all the time. Look, when I was growing up, the cowboy rode off into the sunset. He didn't stay with the girl, right?
Right.
I mean,
They didn't have
as far
relationships.
and when we were little kids, all that was icky to me anyway. When I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, girls were
Exactly.
icky. Girls were icky, and all we wanted to see was the cowboys fighting the Indians. We didn't care about the cowboy kissing the girl, and a lot of times the cowboy never did kiss the girl. And that's my point about we have to have all of this sexuality infused in things that are made for 4 and 5 and 6-year-old children, and it's not necessary. It even shouldn't be there.
Right. And I'm saying that I agree with you, and I think it's regardless of what gender identities are inherently in those characters, because you could have characters that have very gender identity and never go into the relationship aspect of it, and I think a lot of people would
Right,
be
as long as it furthers the narrative of the storyline, and it's not focused upon, and it really shouldn't be. I mean, if
right.
you want to normalize something, then you shouldn't stick it up here and everybody stand around and stare
Right.
at it.
Like I kind of go with this whole thing where in real life you will come across people with all kind of different opinions and different views and different lifestyles, and on its head, you don't always discuss those things with everyone that you meet. Like they just are who they are, and you're dealing with them in a specific context in life. And I think that when you have, like, say, example, a superhero cartoon, I just want to see the stories in the context of them being superheroes. That's all I
Exactly.
need. And if those characters happen to be whatever color, whatever sexual orientation, whatever gender orient, it doesn't matter. If that's what they are, that's fine. You could even go so far as to tell me that they're this, and just say it once, and that's all I need to know.
Well, the
I
other
don't.
the other thing is now here, understand this, people. Back in the day, in the comic books, there were gay characters in the comic books, but it was
Yep.
so ambiguous that we would be
Right.
like, is he or isn't he? Well, we don't know. And they never addressed it. It was up to you, the reader, to fill in that gap in your imagination. And
Right.
I kind of feel like it should still be that way. Uh,
Uh,
in a way, but
I would say
if it's for children, now I'm not talking about adult
right,
oriented stuff. Adult
and I know.
oriented stuff is a whole different, separate animal than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Thundercats. Okay, I'm talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm talking about
Right.
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Or
But the but the ambiguity you're talking about was universal. Even heterosexual ambiguity was present, like the will they or
Yes,
won't they?
right.
Like with Blaine and all this other stuff. Like even going as late as the Batman animated series, like you'd see Bruce Wayne go on dates, but he never took them home.
Yeah,
Never took
and
them home.
and nor should he have, because that was a children's show.
Not to mention it was Bruce fucking sorry, Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
He didn't.
it's
That
okay. It's
wasn't
okay. We cuss on here, but we try not to unless we're doing a rant stream. But yeah,
right.
It's Bruce Wayne. I mean, even in the comic books, I mean, it would be like the old movie serial, where the boy and the girl kiss, and then they pan up to the moon, and then you can decide in your mind what they did or what they didn't do. And it
Because
should still.
when we talk about right, and when we talk about that with children's programming, and like my viewpoint is very simple, especially when it comes to kids. I don't care if it's superheroes or what. Yes, good screenwriting is a big part of it, and the plotting is a part of it. But it boils down to something very simple. As our cultural identity is expanding, whether you agree with it or not, it is here. And if you're going to put characters on the screen that people can identify with in those roles, that's fine. You can do that. But you don't have to center the story around it or put a spotlight on it for it to be effective storytelling. It's the same can be true for if you look at the filmation cartoons, okay, especially the morality was baked into the story. Although it was ham-fisted at times, generally, they didn't beat you over the head with it until the end, where they're like, "Hi, I'm Prince Adam, and today we learned about," like that kind of thing was just whatever.
Well,
But
to get into why that happened, that was to
right,
satisfy a rule at the time
right,
that you had to have so much educational programming on television. So if we could put something like this in there, we can call it educational and get around that rule. That's what that was all
right.
about. We understand it.
Of course,
However, as a kid, I loved my Shazam, my Isis, and they'd beat you over the head at the end with that, and they had the episodes centered around not hitchhiking and not
Mhm.
not stealing and generally being a good person. And I I'm a boomer. Okay, I think kids need to be shown good role models in their
Yeah,
programming, and not some of the crap that they're looking at today that they really shouldn't be watching.
yeah, and I at the end of the day, like that also comes back to your original concern, where cartoons are seem always marketed to kids, and that being a problem. There needs to be a way to say, and they have a rating system for crying out loud.
That's it. That's it. That, like I
Like,
said, if you're producing something for children, it should be for children. Now, there's plenty of adult stuff out there, and it should be clearly marked as adults. But
of
the
course,
things I'm talking about today are not marketed for adults. This stuff is
right.
marketed directly at children, and it really shouldn't be. I
And I
mean,
and I think at the end of the day, like looking at the like deep any deep relationship, going too far into a friendship where things get super conflicty, romantic relationships, and certainly marital and all this stuff. There's a certain point young children just do not need this in their fiction. They just don't need it. They don't need it. And you can hint at things, you can allude to things, you can be ambiguous. And like you say, I think that's a parental thing. Like if they say, "Mommy, why is this character blah 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 blah," and then the parent has the responsibility to have a discussion about that from their perspective. Um, I just think that that's healthy, right? Because
of
I
course.
remember vividly going to see Top Gun in the theater for my birthday. I was still a young kid, and we were sitting there going, every time Kelly McGillis and Tom Cruise kissed, me and my buddy would just, ew. And we would audibly say that to a point where my dad lost his temper during the sex scene and just got in my face and said, "If you don't shut up, we're leaving right now." Because for him, one, he probably was enjoying himself, and two, that's just rude to do that in the theater in general. And I didn't understand that at that point. I just didn't. Um, you know, and that was me at the age. When did that come out? 86. I would have been 9.
Okay,
Um,
I was about 16 at the time. We perfectly enjoyed it at our age, but yeah,
well, yeah. By the time I was 16 and we went to see Sliver, yeah. That movie, that plot sucked, but that shit, yeah. But that's not that film was. Those parts of it were not. It wasn't for me as a 9-year-old kid. It just wasn't. Nor should it have
yeah,
been. Yeah, it goes
yeah.
back to a line. Yeah, it goes back to a line from a certain comedian I shall not talk about because of legal trouble he's having.
Well,
Um,
well, let's address Roy Rogers for a minute. If I distinctly remember when Roy Rogers was on the Linda Carter Wonder Woman show, he did not want to be on screen with her wearing that skimpy costume, and so they
right.
had her change into a Wonder Woman riding costume so that she could ride horses that had the riding breeches and a nice button down shirt for her to wear, because
And to be fair, like although it was driven by Roy Rogers not being comfortable with that, also for the sake of the actor, Linda
it
Carter,
made sense,
you
did it
don't want to
not?
go you don't want to go bare-legged on a horse, man. That's horrible. You're just asking for
And
trouble.
that, yeah, with the leather saddle and all that, that's correct. Jim, I'm going to take just a quick break for a minute, if you don't mind.
No,
If you want to stay on and chat, you can, or I can play something. Just tell me what you want to do, because I need to run into the
I'm,
other room for just a second.
no, I'm happy to talk. I'm happy to talk.
All right, all right. I'm going to turn my camera off just for a second, and I'm going to head out for just a minute.
Sure thing.
Oh, I meant to do this. There we go. Now.
All right. So I totally get where Bill's coming from on everything that he's saying and his concerns, and I think that there's the bottom line is that for me, is it on top of the narrative responsibility for things to be appropriate for their audience? I mean, that's one thing. But I also feel like we currently live in Western culture, like there's just no personal accountability in people, and and parents will blame media all the time for all this stuff, and they don't want to take responsibility for bringing up the daggum kids. Um, it does take a village to a certain degree, but it does start at home, and I think that that's part of it. But if we're talking about the media aspect of it, yeah, they're gonna fix that stuff. They have to fix it because if it's for a kid, it's for a kid. It's for an adult, it's for an adult. And there's room for all of those audiences to have their verse. That's why when I hear Motu fans railing against like the current Netflix cartoon that has like the really weird proportion He-Man and all that stuff, and I'm like, why is that a thing? Kids need to have something, and it doesn't have to be the He-Man I grew up on. Not my He-Man. Doesn't have to be that. Um, and yes, Jim, Linda Carter is still a beautiful woman and an absolute treasure. Jim Largo says the thing that vexes me is creating derivative characters instead of creating new characters who are more diverse. My only counterpoint to that is that there are artists who have tried to create new characters, they don't catch on. One of my favorite examples of this is a character called Cardiac, who was created by Mark Bagley and introduced um, during his run on Amazing Spider-Man. And I thought it was a very interesting character that they had. Um, and it wasn't about, and it was, he's a black character, had a cool backstory, had a cool costume, had a cool name. And it just didn't work for whatever reason. Yeah, we were talking about that stuff, Bill. Um, so, and I'm not saying that the answer is to completely swap out characters and this and that. I don't think that that's necessarily the answer either. But as usual, for me, and you'll find this with my arguments on almost every subject. There's this side of the house that is like super on this side. There's this side of the house that's super on this side, and the probable best result or the best way to fix it is somewhere in the middle. Honestly, because
Well,
I don't like that
we
everything should.
talked about that the other day. The pendulum always swings always in two different directions, and the best place is right down here. but sometimes it has to go all the way over here before it can even begin swinging back in this direction. And then we're
Right.
human beings, so it only stays here for a short period of time before it goes way over here and crazy over here too. So I mean, it's just the way of the
I
world.
mean, in an easy comparison is just like, the '80s versus the '90s versus the aughts versus the 2010s versus 20. Like, there's a very different vibe to each of those, and it's not like one progressive swing in one direction. It goes back and forth the whole time, um,
Mhm.
and to the detriment of society. I feel if we could start, whether we're talking about cartoons or we're talking about foreign policy, I think the same thing rings true. If we could try to begin our discussions with saying, here's what we can more or less all agree on the goal is, and then have an actual respectful debate, whether it's one on one or 8 versus 8 or 8 million versus 8 million. Like we have differences of opinion on every subject one can imagine, from what I like on my pizza to what this character should look like and all this stuff. And the art of debate has just been lost somewhere in the last 30 years. It drives me up the wall, dude.
Oh yeah, it does. It does because uh, I don't know whether it's just the memory cheating or not, but I remember a time when uh, two men could sit down and they could discuss something, and at the end of the day, if they didn't agree on it, they could just agree to disagree about that particular issue and move on and still be friends at the end of the day. Whereas now the consensus seems to be that if your politics and your thoughts don't mirror mine exactly, then we're not able to be friends anymore. And I think that is the absolute stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
I 100% agree with you, and I call that time before Facebook, or BF.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. The social media really has had a big problem with that, and that is because the algorithms tend to feed people the same echo chamber. It's an echo chamber for them because of the algorithms. So they feel like that everybody is justifying their thoughts in their mind, and they're not getting any diverse thought at all. And the other thing is keyboard warriors are they love to fight because they don't have to actually get in each other's face.
and that's the thing. I try very hard. Doesn't always work, especially if I've had a few drinks, to make certain. Hi, Trap Jaw. I try very hard not to say anything online that I wouldn't say to someone to their face. And
Exactly, because there's certain things that you might be able to get away with on Twitter that would get your ass whipped where I live at real quick if you did it to a man's face.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the difference between, you know our generations. Whether there's too much crossover. Like, we're very close to the same generation, very close, because I am like on the very back end of Gen X. Like, I'm one of the last.
Well,
Um,
were you were born in the 70s or the 80s, Jim?
77.
77, and I'm 7 years older than you are then because I was born in 1970. So
Hmm.
we are Generation X. The generation after us are the millennials,
Right.
and the generation after the millennials are the Generation Z or the Zoomers. And the Zoomers are the ones that I feel for. I really do feel for the Zoomers.
I do as well. In as much as culturally we have set them up to fail. We, I think that on the problem we run into. This is also true of people that are from our generation as well, in as much as it's leaned into too much. So, like, our generation was told, "We'll just deal with it," right? But without being told how to deal with it, right? So that's
Well,
where.
I'll tell you these are my thoughts on that. We'll go into the generations here. All right, when I
Sure.
was growing up, children were very autonomous. The parents
Mhm.
didn't get involved with what we were doing much at all unless we were killing each other, and then they would come in and go, "Stop that." Don't kill each
Same.
other. Yeah, we don't want you to kill each
Absolutely the same.
other. Go outside and play, and come home when the street lights come home. We don't give a damn what you do as long as it's not bad, or you're not
As long
hurting.
as you're not, as long as you're outside and getting air and being healthy.
Yeah,
And even for me, that was still very much true.
my
Whereas
grandmother
now,
locked us out of the house. I mean, she would
yep,
shove us out the door, and you could hear the lock click behind you. And don't go back to the house going, we want a drink of water. There's a perfectly good water hose on the side of the house that you can drink out of.
exactly.
And, the-
Whereas
and a lot,
now,
yeah. We came home and we let ourselves in the house with a key, and there wasn't anybody there until mom and dad came home from work.
latchkey. Yeah.
So what happened was, in my opinion, with the millennials, which were the next generation after us, we said we don't want our children to grow up like that, so we're going to take a little more control over their life, which was a good thing, but it was also a bad thing because
Well intentioned, poorly executed. Yeah.
yeah, the millennials became much more. They got everything they wanted. We didn't get what we wanted. A lot of times, we didn't get nearly anything that we wanted. We got what mom and dad were able to give us, and the plate was shoved in front of you. And if you didn't like what was on it, then you went hungry that night. Nobody cooked a separate dinner for you because you didn't like what was being served that night. Whereas
Same.
the millennials, mama would be in the kitchen and the kid would come in and go, "Oh, you're making hamburger helper. I don't like hamburger helper." "Okay, baby, we're gonna make you some chicken McNuggets. Then we'll make you some."
No. Like, I got 2 words for you: peanut allergies.
Yeah, there were none when I was growing up, and if there
No,
had been, I'd have starved to death.
with all respect and due compassion to anyone who actually does have that allergy, that's terrifying. Um, but it exists now, and it's just like, ugh. But I think a lot of it, people joke about it. Comedians from our generation joke about it, but I think it's true. We were outside getting dirty, getting cut, and all this stuff, and doing all these things, and we had to deal with it. Like, I'll never forget. This is the night before 7th grade started for me. Me and my buddies lived in a housing development where everything had a basement, but they were built. So like they would like build the house on a foundation, and then they would have like the dirt mound that was manufactured to grade up, and then you had the hill that went in the backyard, which was on the bottom of the basement floor. So you had this great big yard. There was a nice hill for bikes. And we got this great idea that defied the laws of physics. Let's put a bike ramp at the bottom of that hill so we could like launch. And it worked great the first 6 or 7 times. And then, like on number 8 or 9, I decided I'm going to take this bike that I know to be faster than my bike and that I'm not familiar with, and I'm going to just and well, I didn't pull up at the right time. The bike went one way, I went the other, and there was this distinct feeling of the air leaving my body because it got knocked the wind out of me. And then for about 3 or 4 seconds, the everything seemed fine. But then as soon as I try to flex my muscles to get up, then all the pain hits from all the cuts on the various parts of my body. And I remember my friend's younger sister saying, "Call an ambulance," and I'm like, "Oh God, it's that bad." It wasn't. I was just really. It was like I got into a fight in one instant. It was like the end result of a bad fight all at once. And my mom had to walk me home and had to help me get clean and everything else. It was super embarrassing. But at the same time, that's what would occasionally happen when you were a kid. You would do something stupid and you would get hurt and you would learn the lesson. That's how it goes. You have to let kids make mistakes. You have to
Well,
let kids
what
find
was it?
shit.
The old comedian Titus and his
Yeah,
dad. You know, he was headed towards the wall receptacle with a fork in his hand, and the mom is like, "Don't let him do that." And it's like, "No, no, 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 just let him go ahead." And knocked himself across the room with electricity. Said, "Now he won't ever do that again."
that happened to me, but not with a fork. I actually had a lamp in my room and I wanted to see what electricity looked like when I was a child. I wanted to know. And so, in my infinite wisdom at the age of 5, took my little kitty scissors, the rounded front scissors, but they had the rubber covers on
Hmm.
the handles, which wasn't a common thing at the time. Usually, scissors back then were just
Straight
they were
up, straight
just
up metal. Straight up metal.
yeah. My parents were wise and did not let me have those scissors ever, and probably not for the they did the rounded scissors because, rounded scissors, but the rubber covering on them was an afterthought.
Yeah.
But from between my memory and what my mother told me about it, because she would tell the story to anyone who would listen, up until the day she died. I cut the cord and I was still on my feet because I remember I cut it. It knocked me back, and I was still on my feet, and I kind of twisted in midair and then fell onto my bed. I remember it vividly, and my mother was so impressed by uh, the scissors uh, performance in that she wrote a letter to the company and said, "You may have saved my son's life. Thank you." This, da, 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 da. And we never wanted for child-friendly scissors again. They sent like a case of them. They were like, "Well, great, thank you for not suing us," basically. Um,
Well,
but
you
that
were
was an
telling a
experience
story about,
for me.
yeah, you were telling a story about peanut allergies. Well, let me tell you a story. This actually happened. A friend of
Okay.
mine lives over in Oxford as a professional magician, and he performs at kiddie parties a lot. He does a lot of busking out in the street as well. But there's a magician's trick normally done at children's parties called the peanut butter and jelly trick.
Hmm.
And basically, you have a jar of peanut butter and a jar of jelly, and they tend to change places with each other, and then eventually become a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Mm.
When you're performing that trick in reality, the it's props involved, and I'm not telling you how the trick is done. I'm just telling you it's props involved, and it's not a real peanut butter jar, and it's not a real jelly jar involved in it. There's no peanut butter, and the what appears to be a peanut butter and peanut butter jar is not, never had peanut butter in it, and never would be able to hold peanut butter. However, the sandwich aspect of it, you can either have a fake sandwich or you can have a real sandwich, and normally it's a fake sandwich for the simple reason that you can't haul a peanut butter and jelly sandwich around with you to more than one venue. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Well, my friend cannot perform that trick anymore because just the mere sight of the peanut butter and jelly jar will force the kid to go into his allergy.
What?
No shit. They see the
I think
peanut butter
that.
jelly jar. They see the peanut butter jelly jar. The kid starts going, and the mom's like, "Ah, you can't have that in here. That's peanut butter. He has a peanut butter allergy." And
Well,
so,
so that's where the allergy and the approach to that allergy crosses over from actual physical allergy, which I'm sure is valid for many, 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 many people, but it crosses over into trauma-induced phobia.
that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm not saying
Mm.
that he doesn't have a peanut butter allergy. However, I don't think his peanut butter allergy is near as bad as he thinks it is in his mind. The
Right.
child, I'm.
Yeah.
But no, we won't. We're not able to make mother-in-laws disappear. If we were, we wouldn't have our own mother-in-laws either. Jim
It's a good.
Largo.
That's fair because David Copperfield made the Statue of Liberty disappear. So
He did,
um,
and that was a wonderful trick, was it not? I remember that happening. He also walked through the Great Wall of China. What a wonderful time in life when we could watch things like that on network television.
I actually was on stage with David Copperfield once when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
I was on. I met Brett Daniels one time. He's a pretty cool cat too.
Yeah. This was at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia. This would have been probably '85,
Mm.
and
He was at
they.
now, Copperfield was at the Orpheum Theater in Memphis, Tennessee, a few times. I mean, he might have been even at the Mid South Coliseum one time, but I wasn't able to attend those shows. But yeah. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Busch.
back to our point. I mean, we were talking about the generations, and it got
Hmm.
even worse with the Zoomers. The Zoomers have been catered to in every form and fashion that it's possible, and not only that, but they have these things, and they live and die by them.
Mm.
You know, I don't know if you knew this or not, but it wasn't up until about uh, uh, 2019 that I moved from having a flip phone to having this phone.
Yeah, you've mentioned that in the past, and I worked for a cell phone company for almost 4 years, and one of the things that was a big part of our market share was people in the Midwest, which is where we operated. I worked for U.S. Cellular at the time. Um, they wanted to keep their flip phones, so our company went out of its way to make sure that people still had access to flip phones if they wanted it. And
Mhm.
a large portion of my day, I was top level tech, would be teaching people how to use their daggum phones when they did make the switch. Like, and I didn't mind doing that as long as they're willing to learn, which is
Yeah.
part of the problem. Some people just don't want to learn.
Yeah.
And I could have a whole other discussion about that aspect. I think that there's, when it comes to adaptation to change, whether it's technology or whatever, but I think it's really apparent in technology where people get to a certain point where like I don't want to learn, which at least you're, you know, admitting it, but it sucks. And Jim Largo's exactly right. Military taught us to embrace the suck and adapt and overcome. Well, here's the other thing too, and here's the bad side of it, because I think that this both of these things speak to the same problem. Military taught us to embrace the suck because there was the other side of that, which was, well, we had to deal with this, and now you have to deal with it too. Which implies, well, there's not a better way to do it because this is the way it's always been. And I think that's a dangerous philosophy in any walk of life, in any aspect of living. There's always a possibility to do something better. Um, but I will also say, as a lifelong idealist, you cannot simply stand there, look a problem in the face, and say, there's a better way to do this. And just say, because it's not the way that I think that it should be, I'm just going to just stay at my feet until it changes. That's the problem, is that it's okay to call out things you feel are wrong. I advocate that no matter where you come from, what year you were born in, or anything else. Like that's I think that's an inherent part of the human experience. But you can't just say, point at someone and say you're doing this wrong and judge them for doing things differently than how you feel they should be, without having some sort of compassion for the idea that there's a reason that person or these people have the ideas that they have. You can't not be willing to meet somebody in the middle to pull them along. The
Well,
more
I
you
think that goes down to the old saying, those who don't learn the lessons of history are forced to repeat them.
exactly,
But
and people love to quote that, but they don't like to live by it.
no, well, I hate to do this, Jim, but we're down to about 3 viewers now. We've had a wonderful live stream that's lasted nearly 3 hours once again on this Sunday afternoon. The reason I got up and left a minute ago is because I heard my wife's alarm go off. She has to go to work tonight and be there at 5 o'clock. So she's going to be leaving here pretty soon. And I would like to spend a little bit of time with my dear wife before she leaves. And we've had a wonderful discussion, Jim. I'm glad you came on the show. I'm going to edit the thumbnail and put you on as a special guest, and make sure that I get links up to you in the description when I edit it later on tonight. I appreciate you coming on like you did. It really helps to have someone on with you. For me, I know you like to do it alone, and I love to watch you do it alone. But for me, I love having somebody to knock my ideas off of, because it's hard for me to just sit and talk to the ether.
I'm happy to do it, and it's always a pleasure just to speak with you. I love watching, but I love talking to you even more. So thank you for having me.
No problem. And thank you, Jim Largo, for sticking it out the whole way. And Will McLaughlin says, great chat, fellas. Thanks for a great show. I'm glad you guys came on. Jim, next time you come on, maybe we can pick this back up again. We've had a wonderful discussion. We brought out a lot of different things. We may have disagreed here or there, but we're still friends in the end, and that's all that matters. And we got to see a few of my wonderful toys. And once again, here's Linda Carter. Isn't she beautiful? That's just a beautiful figure, in my opinion. I just love that figure. So have a good night, Jim, and we'll be back in touch with each other about other things that we need to talk about too. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
Good
sir.
night, everybody. If you enjoyed today's adventure, please hit like and subscribe and share the video. Thank you.